Okay, and welcome to the dumbest, shittiest, most fucked up, COVID-infested podcast that has ever existed since the dawn of humanity. This is the third time Dave's hearing this. He may have forgotten that this is how it goes. I'm here with a special guest, round 3, with Dave Champion, the author of Income Tax Shattering the Myths. He has other books as well, but they're about health and other things, so I'm just going to talk about this one because this is going to be relevant for the show. He does have other books. Dave, can you please do a plug on your website where people can find your materials?
Yes, thank you. All they have to do is go to drreality.news, and that's drreality.news, and they can see a bunch of information about me. They can click on store. They can see all my writings that are available and so forth. Thank you for that.
Perfect. Welcome back to the show. Third time on the show. I was checking. We did 2 shows. We did one show about 12 months ago, and we did another show about 11 months ago. So there was about a month gap. We did 2 shows. What's been new, man? You've been busy. What's happening?
Oh, my God, so busy. There's always... the IRS's computer is an interesting thing. And when I say the IRS's computer, what do I mean by that? So let me give you some numbers. Let me give your audience some numbers so that they'll appreciate why I consistently say the IRS's computer rather than the IRS. So for 2022, the IRS said that it received 5.4 billion information returns, things like 1099s, K-1s, W-2s. And I estimated for 2022, they received 600 million tax returns, things like 1040s and 1120s. So the total number of tax documents the IRS received in 2022 was 6 billion, that's with a B, 6 billion documents, which is pretty impressive when you consider the world's population is only 8.5 billion, and they received 6 billion documents. So, and they've got 100,000 employees. Most of those are not tax people, they're just support people. So let's say of the 100,000, let's say maybe 30,000 of them actually deal with taxes. You've got 30,000 employees who deal with taxes, and you've got 6 billion documents per year, probably more now, because we're talking figures that are 4 years old now. So nobody's looking at anything you send in. So when I was a boy, the income tax was administered by humans, which got help from computers at times. Today, in 2026, the income tax is administered about 99.8% by computers, and that little 0.02% is when the computer says, oh, I think I have a problem, and kicks it out to a human.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it is, I guess, I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense because to the IRS, all legal fictions are persons. So even though there may only be, how many people are there in America?
Last I saw, 348 million.
48 million. But then you'd have to, from their perspective, you'd have to add in all of the legal fictions would all be persons as well. So we're probably looking at, how many millions of corporations are there in America, or also internationally that may be filing returns or reporting documentation on people because they think they're supposed to in America.
Sure.
So the 348 human people, or men and women, is probably actually a vast minority compared to the amount of corporate legal fictions that people are, the percentage of that 6 billion, because it obviously doesn't make sense. 330 million, 6 billion documents, right?
Yeah, because sometimes just a business person, he's got 3 LLCs, he's got a trust, he's got a C Corp, and if he's the average American who doesn't know jack shit about tax law, all of those are filing.
Yeah. One of the first things I wanted to talk to you about today is I wanted to, and I know we kind of covered this maybe in a previous episode, but I wanted to do it again because if I would have remembered all of it, it would have been thorough. But I'd like to be more thorough because so many things have changed over the past year. And I'd like you to kind of give me a little bit of a background on, because you've been doing this kind of stuff and you've been in the tax space. You started your research in, I want to say, 1991, or was it even 1993? Okay. So You've seen the ups and downs and the waves and the changes throughout the tax, what you would call the tax honesty movement, right? I don't necessarily use that term. I think that term is a term that was used very often back in the 2000s. And I remember, if I remember correctly, I didn't review our last show. When 2008, when the crash hit, the tax honesty movement kind of collapsed, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Absolutely true.
Can you give us I'd like a kind of like a story as to how that happened, what happened, and then what you see going on now and what you think is going to happen. Is it going to be the same thing? You know, I kind of wanted to talk about like that kind of a thing with you.
So the tax honesty community going towards 2008 was about the most vibrant I'd ever seen it. And here's an interesting thing. There were a lot of subgroups in the tax honesty community leading up to 2010, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There was the Fifth Amendment people, okay? Oh, I don't have to file a tax return because that violates my Fifth Amendment rights to file a tax return, okay? There was the 861 people, right? Larkin Rose, which were...
I think that was also Snipes, right?
Snipes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, and then there was the Irwin Schiff zero return thing, right? There was all these little camps. And there was a lot of energy ginned up by all these different arguments, all these different viewpoints. And so I got in 93. So in like 2007, my point of view was like, hell yeah, people are interested. This is a great thing. People actually want to know the truth. And then about August of 2008 hit, when people started to really understand that the economy was going upside down. This was not speculation by pundits. It was happening real time in their own lives. Okay? And my interpretation is that people lost interest in the truth of the income tax because their point of view was, I am so lucky in this market that I still have a job. I'm not talking to my boss about the income tax at all because there's all these people over here. He can keep them and get rid of me. I'm already struggling to raise my kids and make my mortgage and so forth, right? So I'm not going to rock the boat. The kind of the unusual thing was, and I consider that more of a psychological hit, all right? But the thing that was interesting is it was like that. There was this robust tax honesty movement. It would be like if you imagine an auditorium filled with like several hundred people, and you step outside for a second, you look at your phone, you go, nothing there. You step back inside and the room is empty. That's almost as sudden as it seemed to be. And so just like the economy, I'm sure you've seen the graphs from 2008 onward as the economy grew and pulled itself out, right? Mm-hmm. That's pretty much what happened with the tax honesty community as well. It started heating up again. But just like the economy, it was a very long arc, measured in at least a decade, okay, before it was really back on its feet.
So 2018.
Roundabouts, yes. But here's an interesting thing that happened in 2010. And I don't talk about this a lot because it's kind of weird and unpleasant, and I don't want people to get the idea that the tax honesty community is weird and unpleasant, right? So you and I have talked about the fact that when I got the idea to write Income Tax Shattering the Myths, it was predicated on the principle that there was no single authoritative compendium in existence in the country, right? So I was like, there's 17 years of research in that. That was 17 years of my research leading up to the day I published it, right?
So, March 12th, 2012 is the one I have.
Okay, so it was originally, the first edition was published in 2010.
Oh, I see that up top. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there was no single compendium. And I thought to myself, if my fellow citizens have to put in the 17 years of research that I put in order to know all of these things, no one's going to do it. And the truth of the income tax will be dead before it gets started, because nobody's got time for that. And so few people are interested. I was just fortunate that I had a passion to acquire the knowledge. I was in a position professionally where I had the time to go to the library all the time, because the internet wasn't a thing way back in the day, right? So, I was making copious trips to the law library every week. Later in the research project, we were literally renting 15-seat passenger vans and taking crews of people to the law library, each getting their assignment sheet. I mean, that's the effort we put into this, right? So obviously, no ordinary American is going to do that. They're just going to file their tax returns.
What triggered you to do all that? Like, what pissed you off?
So I owned a couple of businesses in SoCal back before I knew the truth. And I had an accountant on retainer, and I didn't know anything about the IRS. I didn't know anything about tax law. I didn't want to. This is what I pay you for, right? Take care of it for me. Well, he didn't. I didn't know that. So what would happen is I'd get a letter from the IRS, and like a dumbass, I wouldn't open it, because again, I'm doing my thing. I don't care about this. I would hand it to my CPA. You're on retainer, handle it. The next letter I get, you're on retainer, handle it. And he wasn't handling it. So the next thing I know, I walk into the bank, and small bank, things were different back then, and I knew all the people personally. I grew up in that neighborhood. And the teller, as I walked to the window, she starts sobbing. And I'm like, oh my God, what's going on? And she's like, I had to do it. Do what? I had to give them $32,000 out of your payroll account. I'm like, who's they? Right? Well, the IRS. How is this possible? Right? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, as I understood it back then. So I had to scramble and come up with $32,000 to pay my people, because that's an honor issue for me. If you work for me and I owe you money, come payday, you need to get paid. Okay? And $32,000 was a lot more money back in 1992, late 92, early 93 than it is today, right? I had to scrounge, come up with all that money to pay my people like that, because like payday was like 6 days out, right? So it turns out that my accountant had screwed everything up. So I'm having dinner with some friends, and I'm griping about what happened, and they start laughing. And I'm like, I'm not sure what reaction is appropriate to the story I'm telling you, but I'm pretty sure laughing is absolutely not on that list. And they were like, oh, you'd be laughing too if you knew what we knew. I could use a laugh, tell me, right? So they started telling me about this, and I did not buy it at first. Oh, I shouldn't say I didn't buy it, because I knew these men to be impeccably honest. So I knew that they believed it. I'll say that, right? But there were some things that struck me. Because of my law enforcement background, I had a question. Here was the question. If as a cop I wanted to go seize your property, I needed a warrant. All right? So how did the bank take $32,000 of my money?
Yeah.
At the request of the IRS. There's no warrant. This was never seen by a court. Nobody determined that I owed this money. And I'd read the Constitution many, many times, so I understood there was no income tax exception to the requirement for a warrant, right? So that got me thinking right there. Like, how can an agency over there in its building, no third party, no independent arbiter, just in their building, fill out a form, hand it to the bank, and the bank gives them $32,000 of my property? How is that possible? So I had questions. So the two gentlemen that were talking to me, they were pretty wise in that they said, after a bit, they said, okay, we're done. Here's 2 books. You order these 2 books, and you read them. then we'll spend our time telling you more. They said, because so many people, we tell them and they blow it out their ass and we've wasted our time. Okay. So the next day, of course, there was no internet back then, so I'm calling an 800 number and giving them my credit card number over the phone, right? The old way. And so they sent me the books, and one of them was a waste of time, and the other one was Lynn Meredith's Vultures and Eagles Clothing, which I don't think anyone's even heard of today.
Never.
Right? And neither one of those books changed my view. It was like, this is really interesting stuff and I still don't know. Okay? That was my position. Really interesting. But I still don't have any answers. And you know how I am. You've known me for a while. I'm very fact-based. So it was like, I still don't have the facts. I don't have the hardcore answers. So anyway, so I went back to these guys and I said, okay, you told me you'd tell me more if I've read it. I've read them. And then they took me to another guy's house. I am not a headache person. A lot of people get headaches, right? I've had maybe 5 headaches in my whole life. So they took me to this guy's house. He had turned his whole house into a law library. And I spent 3 hours with him. And he's pulling one book out and showing me this, pulling another book out, pulling a file out, showing me this, read that. I had a headache. It was so much to consume. And I still remember the one thing that stood out that evening with him in those 3 hours was that the United States district courts in Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Island, American Samoa, and so forth, they're not within the judicial branch. Those courts are part of the executive branch. So you have a United States District Court in Alabama that's part of the judicial branch. There's a court in Puerto Rico called the United States District Court. Same name, same big bench, same fat ass in a black dress, right? But in Puerto Rico, that court's part of the executive branch, not part of the executive, not part of the judicial.
Because it's a U.S. territory, it's under the exclusive jurisdiction of Congress, whereas in Alabama, it's under the Republic, which would be a totally separate system. The Republic is very heavily tied down by constitutional aspects, whereas the congressional areas are not.
Yes, and the federal judges in the possessions and territories are I don't know if it's still this way now, but when I was reading this 33 years ago, they were employees of the Department of the Interior.
Well, they're still employees of something, yeah, whether it's that or something different. I mean, that would make sense. The Department of the Interior would make sense, right?
It would absolutely make sense. I presume it's the same because, as you point out, it makes sense.
Makes sense.
But that was an eye-opener to me in the sense that, wow, there's a lot I'm ignorant about. I would have never in a million years imagined a United States District Court in Puerto Rico was not in the judicial branch. So it was a real eye-opener about how little I knew. And I'm not big on being ill-informed or uninformed, right? That doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, me too.
So I'd seen enough that I imagine that where there's smoke, there's fire. So I said, if that's true, I need to find this fucking fire. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then the more I tore into it, the more I realized there was a problem. So it was a gradual process.
Were you curious? Were you pissed off, or were you kind of both? Where were you at?
But when I finally said to myself, this tax does not apply to the average American living and working in the 50 states, earning their own domestic income. When I came to that realization, I don't think it would be an exaggeration to use the word enraged. Mm. So you know my history. You know I was an Army Ranger. You know I went in law enforcement. And that was part of my my days of not understanding how the world works. Okay? I'm going to, join the military and defend democracy and freedom around the world. Yeah, okay. Yes, I was a stupid young man. And I didn't learn my lesson in the military, so I came out and I went into law enforcement. Yeah, so at that point in my life, my perspective was, I'm just not one of these people who sit around and go, oh, liberty's a wonderful thing. It's great. I'm an American. Okay. My view was I'd put my ass on the line for it.
How long were you in the military and in law enforcement? What's the timeline on that? Just
4 years in the military, 6 years for law enforcement.
10 years total. Okay. Sorry, continue.
Yeah. So my experiencing rage when I finally came to that moment where I said it's all true, it doesn't apply to us, was that I felt that for me and every American who felt like I did, that we have a personal investment in this country, right? I think a lot of Americans are just along for the ride. Today, I think that, okay? Back then, I would have said, oh, yeah, most Americans are personally invested in America and personal liberty and constitutional protections and unalienable rights and blah, blah, blah. I would have thought most everybody felt like I did, which turned out to be not true. But I felt like the whole nation had been stabbed in the back by this con job. And I found that insufferable. And it could not stand. So then came more and more and more and more research. And you remember the accountant I told you about that screwed up and got me into this problem in the first place? Mm-hmm. So I started taking some evidence to him because he was the only tax guy I knew, all right? So I was like, hey, here's the stuff that I've been seeing. And I'd show him, hand it across the desk, read the part that's highlighted. And, so it appears the tax doesn't apply to ordinary Americans like me. So what do you have to say? And so he said, there's other stuff that you're not bringing to me. Oh, well, great. Because if I've missed it, I want to see it, right? I don't want to just see this part I'm seeing and then learn later that there's stuff I should have seen and didn't, right? So I'm like, great, bring it. When can I see it? He's like, well, I don't have it right here on my desk, so I need 2 weeks. Great, I'll see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks came and went. 4 weeks came and went. 6 weeks came and went. 8 weeks came and went. I kept calling his office, and he would never take my calls. So I eventually made a personal visit, and his secretary was like, well, he's busy. I don't care. And I walked right into his office. and I said, because now I'm getting pissed, right? And I pay him a monthly retainer, and you're not picking up and talking to me?
Oh, you were still paying him at that point. Oh, wow. Okay. That's
yes, I was still paying him at that point. So I had not yet reached the point where I said, okay, this is all a scam. Okay, this is in the early phase. So I said, you're not talking to me, and you told me I'd have the answer in 2 weeks, and it's like 2 months now. And he said, I'm going to fix your wagon. I'm going to send you upstairs to my friend who's a tax attorney. I thought, you're going to fix my wagon? That was a pretty interesting outlook, considering that he told me he was going to show me what the deal was and never did. So now you're going to fix my wagon? So he sent me upstairs. For whatever reason, I still remember this gentleman's name. His name was John Barlow. And he was a tax attorney. And must have been a successful one because his office was awesome. I mean, talk about a man cave. It was like, he had this like desk that was the size of a football field, and everything was hardwood and gorgeous and antiques everywhere. So he must have been a very successful tax attorney. So I walked in and he said, "Oh, yeah, Ira called and said that you wanted to ask me a couple questions. Come on in." So I sat down, and he says, "What do you got for me?" I thought, I'm like, okay, so I don't know if I want to just repeat the same things I said to Ira. Maybe I sort of want to do one hard-hitting question. So I said, is everyone who earns a living in a State of the Union required under federal law to pay income tax? And there was this very, very long silence. And he just stared at me, stared at me, stared at me. That's a little uncomfortable between two guys who don't know each other right now. And finally, he said, I only work with people who are liable for the income tax. And in that moment, Brandon, I said to myself, you know, that's why you gave me that cagey fucking answer, because you know that the answer to that is no, but you're not willing to say that to me. Okay. And that whole big pregnant pause thing was, in my estimation, him trying to figure out how he wanted to play that.
I'd be so fucking pissed. Oh my God. I'd probably fucking start smashing his fucking shit on his table. I have never, ever met someone that gave me any indication that they knew about any of this stuff. And that's the thing that I try to tell people all the time in my shows and stuff like that, because everybody comes into this movement, they think everybody knows, and they didn't tell you. And I have literally talked to so many people, and I have never once talked to an accountant, an attorney, that even when I talk to DOJ guys or attorneys for the city of Glendale or attorneys over here, I can tell that they really have no idea about anything. You can tell the way that they react, the long pauses, the way that they're I mean, either that or they're the best actors in the world and they shouldn't be doing law, they should be doing acting. I just don't think that's the case. I am in Southern California, but I'm pretty good at being able to feel out if someone's doing that. And I've just never, ever, and if I ran into someone like that, I'd be so fucking mad. I'd be like, dude, you have all this stuff, and the reason why you lie to people and won't fucking tell people the truth is because you want all this stuff or whatever. I'd be like pissed, bro. That's crazy.
Yeah. So my experience parallels yours. I've been in this space now more than 3 decades, and I have never met an accountant, a CPA, a company owner, CFO, a company attorney, private attorney, tax attorneys, all of those in one big category, right? People who should know. Okay? I've never met one.
Except this guy.
Presumably, yes.
Huh.
Again, that's my presumption. That's why there was that big silence as he was playing this out in his head. Do I give him answer A? Do I give him answer B? And how much do I want to get into it with this guy? And is he going to go out? Is he going to leave my office and tell other people, oh, yeah, John said? All right. I think that's really what was going on in his head. Let me share a story with you, if I may. Not too terribly long ago, I was on the phone with a payroll company. It was not ADP, but so that your audience understands, it was a company like ADP. Okay? And so on this call was me and the legal expert from the payroll company. Okay? And you can't get anything accomplished unless you're talking to somebody who at least thinks they're an expert, right? And then the account rep for the company that was getting their payroll done through that service. And boy, that call started congenially enough. Everybody was polite, professional. And then we started talking about the law. And we went to the definition section for payroll withholding. And we went to the definition of employee for the purpose of payroll withholding. And I said, let's read this aloud. And it's, the term employee means an officer, employee, elected official of the United States, a state, any political subdivision thereof, and blah, blah. And of course, as you're aware, in a definition in the tax code, the enumerated items that follow the word includes form a class.
Yeah.
Okay? And of course, everything that's mentioned after the word includes in that definition is somebody who works for the government.
You're the only person I've ever found that covers the word includes in a comprehensive way. Ever.
Thank
by
you.
the way. Ever.
Well, it's critical, especially in tax law.
Like that, I learned that from you. There's nobody else that has ever covered that subject. And it's covered in the book, and you've covered on a bunch of your shows, and I thank you for that, because it's big. That's a huge, monstrous piece of information. It's very important.
So, the definition is a little archaic in the way it's phrased. The word includes and includes shall not be deemed to exclude other things otherwise within the meaning of the term defined, right?
That's from 26 U.S.C. 7701, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that original definition actually comes from the late 1800s, okay? And then it was pulled forward into the code, not into the code, into the statutes in 1913. Okay. So that's Americans don't talk that way anymore. And I've covered in detail on some of my videos. And I had a guy write me the other day, and he said, I saw your video about includes. Where does it say that that's the meaning, that it creates a class? I don't know. Can you read? I mean, it says what it means. Shall not be deemed to exclude other things otherwise within the meaning of the term defined. I mean, and then I give an example out of Title 27. That says includes and including shall not exclude things otherwise within the class defined. Okay, this is not rocket science, right? But anyway, so back to the expert. So we read the definition together, and I say, okay, so based on the enumerated items, what is the class that you see here? That's a dangerous question for the guy on the other end who's in the payroll business. Okay? Because the answer is clear. It's all government workers. That's why I say, all of the enumerated items are government workers. Right? So what's the class? So suddenly the congeniality ended, and he raised his voice, and he said, "Do you think I am stupid?" First of all, that's a really interesting response to what is the class that you see. Okay. Then my thought, the Dave Champion thought, was, yeah, if you're in the payroll business and you've never read the definitions that control the payroll business, yeah, you're stupid. But I was on somebody else's dime, so I had to be professional. I said, no, not at all. We're just reading the law together. And so then the rep that was on the call... she kept saying this: we're just doing what the IRS tells us. Okay. So she said that about 4 times. The 4th time was towards the end of the call, and the end of the call was precipitated by them hitting the hang-up button. But I said to her, you've said that about 4 times now, that you're just doing what the IRS tells you. I said, today, on this call, since we're all sitting in front of computers, you read it with your own 2 eyes, what the law actually says. Shouldn't you be obeying the law rather than some disembodied voice on an 800 number at the IRS? And she said, that's a really bad idea. I share that to make the point that when you say you've never met anybody, and I'd say I've had these conversations for 3 decades, they absolutely will not accept it. I was on shortly after the payroll company. I was on with a tax attorney a couple weeks after that, and went through the same exact drill with 3401C definition of employee, right? And I said to him after we read it aloud, I said, you're an attorney, you understand what it means to establish a class, right? Yes, I do. So what's the class? Again, dangerous moment for them, right? And there's this pause, and he says, what? What? Oh, hey, I've got an emergency in my office. I have to go. I'll call you later. Bye. Click.
It's so funny that you say all this stuff, because I was doing a show past couple of shows. I did a show with Joe Lustig. I did another show yesterday looking over a traffic video. And I always tell people, recently I've been telling people, I'm like, if you really want to live my life, and it sounds like also the life of Dave Champion, no one wants to really talk to you anymore. Like, you wind up being, like, there's 2 classes of individual. There's your fans. They all want to talk to you. So there's a lot of people who want to talk to you. But then anyone in a professional or commercial or governmental basis, they just don't want to talk to you anymore. I mean, period. And that has advantages. Because most people are like, oh, I just want to be left alone. I just want to be left alone. I'm telling you, guys like me and Dave, I mean, we're left alone. I'm telling you. We are the ones who are left. I mean, I couldn't get a hold of fucking people in the IRS if my life depended on it. I'm trying to file in a Supreme Court case, and they've lost 2 of my parcels already from my writ of certiorari on my SBA case. They lost the first parcel, and they lost the second parcel. The first one, I gave it to them because it was during the very beginning of the federal shutdown. Even though the Supreme Court didn't shut down really, because I looked into that too, I gave it to them. I was like, all right, fine. $500 worth of printed booklets, my writ of certiorari, my check, everything was lost. Okay, I said, okay, fine, I'll give it to you. So I resent it in January or February. That one got lost too, and that's when I was like, all right.
Wait a second. I think you're supposed to do it like this. It got lost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
The second time is when I it kind of shocked me, really, to be honest with you. I was just like, wow, I think they are literally receiving my writ of certiorari with the check, and they're looking it all over, and they're seeing that the formatting, all the rules, every single thing, every margin, the spacing, the type of font is exactly and precisely as per the rules of the Supreme Court rules, because I went through every single one and made sure it was absolutely perfect. And they said, this is going to get approved. If we cash this check and we do this, it's going to get approved to be issued to the Supreme Court justices.
To be considered.
To be considered. They're not going to pick it up. There's almost no chance they're going to pick it up. We don't even want them to even.
Correct, yes.
We don't even want them to even see this thing. I think what happened.
So during my 17 years of research, I filed. I can't even tell you how many Freedom of Information Act requests. Literally, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Back in the early days. 99% of what's on the internet today from the IRS was not available on the internet. You had to use the Freedom of Information Act. So there came a time when the IRS Disclosure Office put me and another researcher on a blacklist. It didn't matter what we requested. We didn't get any response ever. Now, a very common response is they send you a letter and they say, we're going to need more than the 20 statutory days. We will get back to you in 60 days or whatever. Okay, that's very, very common in the disclosure world. And if you have beef with that, you can call them and say, I don't agree to that. And then they'll be like, okay, then go to court. But what they were doing to me and this fellow researcher of mine, we were blacklisted. We never got anything ever. And if we wanted what we requested, we had to go to the United States District Court and file a FOIA lawsuit. Because basically the Disclosure Office said, this guy Champion and this guy Cruz, they get nothing from us anymore. Fuck them. That's a violation of the law. But aside from going to court, FOIA has no teeth. So, for instance, the employees that work in the Disclosure Office, if they create a blacklist and put you on it so they're disobeying federal law, there is no consequence to them. Zero. If I were to rewrite the FOIA law, there'd be teeth.
Mm-hmm.
If it's found that you intentionally are violating this law, something from you get a year off without pay to possibly you go to prison.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. Because
so
this is hiding stuff from the American people.
In the 90s, the law libraries didn't have the IRC or the IRM, or you just didn't really even know to even...
Oh, they had them. But we're talking internal documents that only employees of the IRS would see.
I see.
Yeah.
Was the IRM available at the local law library, or only the IRC?
Only the IRC.
Oh, that's so shitty.
Yeah. And then, like in my book you read about Part 1100, organization and staffing, where I talk about the Office of the Assistant Commissioner International, and that collections, examination, and criminal investigation are all under the Assistant Commissioner International.
Vaguely remember that. Yes, it's been a while, but yes, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those were the sort of internal documents that you had to FOIA for.
I see.
And even then, it was a challenge to get some of the documents out of them.
That's interesting because I find the IRM to be a lot more clear and robust than the IRC personally. There's a lot of sections of the IRM where they're talking about like one of the most common sections is the one like foreign entities that are not liable to filing a tax return. It's very pretty clear. I mean, they do use their favorite terminology. They use their favorite words, their favorite terms.
Yeah.
They use trade or business, one of their favorite.
Yep.
They use employee, their favorite. They use United States, their favorite. They use the word states, their favorite. That's the four keys that they love. Or taxpayer. That's their golden calf. That's the if they sacrifice kids to Moloch or Baal, like that is their Baal.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I met with the IRS attorney one time, and I used to use the title, the website, non-taxpayer.org. And that really pissed the government off, okay? So I'm talking to this IRS attorney.
That's awesome.
And she says to me, Mr. Champion, you have this website name, non-taxpayer.org. What is a non-taxpayer? I said, so first of all, ma'am, that is not coined by me. That was coined by a federal court in economy, plumbing, and heating. So you can ask the court. However, I said, I think there's an easier, faster way to determine the meaning than by having to dig out that case or go to that court. I said, the definition is a 267701A 14, right. Any person liable for any tax contained within this title. I said, so a non-taxpayer is any person not liable for any tax contained within this title.
Very simple.
Dude, you should have seen the look on her face. I wish I'd had like Apple glasses or something I was videoing. The look on her face, the pristine simplicity of just adding the word not into that definition blew her mind.
It really is that simple. There's no other way to even if you wanted to describe it in some other way, you really couldn't. It's really the only option.
And she did not have a sense of humor either.
Yeah. Yeah, I
mean, I've talked to some IRS employees back in the day. You know, they had a sense of humor about some of this stuff. She had no sense of humor. She did. I thought it was hysterical. She didn't see the humor.
I love it. Okay,
so you were about the gigantic IRS agent who tried to intimidate me.
What year was it that happened?
Oh my God, this would have been like 95.
I don't think so. What's the story?
So this guy calls me. He calls me on my phone, and he says, "I want you to come down here and meet with me." I'm like, okay. So I drive my ass. I live way out in North Los Angeles County at the time. I drive my ass, probably with traffic, about an hour and a half into downtown LA, 300 North Los Angeles Street, which used to be the main federal building pre 9/11, right? And so I go there to meet with this IRS, and I've always been like, you want to talk to me? Let's talk, because I know what the fucking law says. Let's talk. Right?
Yeah.
So I get there, and I go to the desk, and I put in my name, and they say, oh, Mr. Jones, whatever his name is, will be out in a moment. Okay. So this guy walks out. Brandon, he's like 6'6", 300 pounds. He looks like one of the front linemen for the Rams.
Oh, my God.
Okay? He is stuffed into this suit. He looks like a fucking sausage stuffed inside how the skin holds the sausage in. And so I've got a tape recorder and a witness. That was all arranged in advance. So we go into this room, right? Now, you'd think it would be like a nice room, like we're sitting here having a conversation.
That's
right?
really smart, by the way. That was a quick little thing that you said there, but I want to really shine the spotlight on that. repeat what you just said. That's so huge. That's monstrous what you just said, and you just kind of like downplayed it so much.
The part of tape recording and a witness?
Yeah, explain that.
Yeah.
Go into more detail on that. That's actually really, really, really cool and important.
Well, the tape recording is obvious, right? But
you had an actual physical one of those little micro tape recording devices that are like handheld, where you click the side, the red button, and it records.
Didn't exist back then.
With the tape.
I had a big thing with a cassette tape with like 8 buttons on the front, and you have to push the button.
So it was like an answering machine for like a phone.
Correct.
Or something.
Yes.
Was it literally an answering machine?
No, but that's it was like the size of.
So you brought in like a whole fucking answering machine, essentially.
Yes.
Did he know you were bringing that in?
Yes, that was arranged in advance. Okay. I said, I'm happy to sit and talk with you, but it's got to be on the record.
Okay.
And then the reason I took a witness,
because I just thought you just randomly you have like a pouch and you're just like, okay. Yeah. I didn't know if you even told him beforehand. Got my answering machine, clunk. You know what I mean?
Well, here's another sign that they're corrupt. They won't talk to you if you don't tell them about the recording in advance.
Okay.
If you show up and say, "Here's my recording device," they'll get up and walk out of the room.
Yeah.
That also lets you know that they're full of shit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, of course. So that's why it's so brilliant. Everything. I love to just say straight up, we're going to record. Or if I meet him randomly, it's like, hey, I'm going to record this, pull out my phone, put the recording on, show it to him, and put it on the table. But they won't talk to you. They won't know it.
They won't.
Again, like I said before, you really start to kind of get this stuff if no one ever wants to talk to you again. But anyways, continue. Go ahead.
So I brought the witness because if I ever had to use that tape, I didn't want some enterprising fucktard attorney at the IRS to say, you edited this tape.
Doctored it, yeah.
So I wanted there to be a real live person who could take the stand and say, no, that's exactly, he didn't edit this, that's exactly how the conversation went down. Okay? That's why I had a witness in addition to the
Brilliant.
tape. All right? So anyway, this
guy...
Was
the witness also set up beforehand? You told the IRS that you're going to bring both the recording device and the witness?
That's correct.
Fascinating.
If you don't tell them, you'll get down there for the meeting and they'll say, "Who's this?" "That's my witness." Goodbye. And they'll leave. They'll walk in the back.
Huh, that is so interesting.
And they want 20 days advance notice.
For that
even if you
specifically.
So even if you call them 3 days before and say, "I'm going to bring a tape recorder," meeting's off.
So they'll reschedule it to a minimum of 20 days after that point.
Correct.
Interesting.
So anyway, so this guy, like I said, the front lineman for the Rams. And he's telling me, if you don't file a return, I'm going to take everything you have. And
he was doing that on the recorder, in front of the recorder and the witness?
Yes. And dude, it's like one of those like interrogation rooms you see on the cop shows. It's like a desk and a couple of chairs in a room that's like, 10 by 6. Okay. And he's leaning over in my face. Okay. And he's got this big voice, and he's telling me how it's going to be. So when he says, if you don't sign and he slides 1040s across to me, and he says, if you don't sign these, I'm going to take everything you own. And I said, don't be childish. You know what? I said, don't be childish. If you could take everything I own, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't be here at this meeting. You would have already done it.
That's a good point, actually, yeah.
Right. So that kind of chilled him out a little bit. But then he started saying, you're going to sign. He started getting chesty again. You're going to sign these returns. And I said, why would I do that? And he takes his ham hock of a hand. He stands up and he slams his hand on the metal table, and the whole metal table does this. You can hear it on the tape, right? And he says, because you're going to sign them.
What amazes me about this is guys like you are very few and far between, and it's becoming less all the time because it's been so many years since the 80s and 90s. I have heard so many stories over the last, 10, 15 years, going back about 10, 15 years, maybe 2010. Not a whole lot of stories before that, but up to 2010. There's nothing like this there hasn't been anything really like this. Like the way that they would be so cocky and so intimidating with the recorder and the witness like that. Like, I don't think they've really behaved like that for 20 plus years. From a lot of the reports that I get and a lot of the experiences that I have, they don't even really call to have people come in. There's no meetings. There's no in-person. No. It's all just these very vague letters, and they just kind of go away, and it's all very vague. It's all become like this kind of very vapid, gaseous.
Yep, absolutely. So the punchline on that was, and I have to admit, I did engage in a little bit of acting. After he did that, he slammed his thing and yelled at me. I sat back and I went, I'm like, dude, sit your ass down. You're making a complete ass of yourself. And I turned to my witness, you see what a fucking ass he's making of himself? And with that, he told me the meeting was over.
And he just got up and walked out, and then you walked out, and then that was it.
Didn't even escort me to the front.
Just left you in the room with the door open?
Yes. He got up and walked away.
Huh.
And I said to my witness, I said, well, I guess we should go now. So I picked up my tape recorder. We walked out. I stopped at the front. I went to the front counter and I said, do you validate?
Oh, my God.
And she was like, get out of here.
You wouldn't happen to still have that tape somewhere or
no,
recording
my
of
God,
that?
No.
Oh, shit, okay.
I wish I did.
Yeah.
If I understood back then where I would be today, I would have kept so many things that I didn't think to keep. Yeah.
I try to record. I'm like a freak. I try to record fucking everything, scan everything. If it's a fucking Post-it note, I'm trying to scan it because I don't know. It's also a lot easier to record things today than it was back then. You don't need a fucking answering machine in a goddamn, messenger bag to record shit,
And you can transfer stuff easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Back then, if I wanted to keep that, I would have had to pull the cassette tape out, put an adhesive label on it, write IRS interview, blah, 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 and stick it in a cabinet someplace.
Did those, we're getting off, did those degrade after a while too? Wouldn't you need to clean them every once in a while and stuff too? Or does it just kind of, you can just...
The cassette tapes?
Yeah. I mean, it's off the beat. I mean, it's just kind of relevant.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the 90s, all the stuff was going down. You started realizing all this stuff. So you started kind of getting more and more into it. You were enraged, and that's kind of when all this started. And then it all kind of moved forward through the 2000s. You were doing research all through the 2000s, obviously. And then in 2008, there was the collapse, and then you decided to write a book around that time period, 09, whatever, 08, 09. And then by 2010, we have the release of Income Tax Shattering the Myths.
Yes, and I had stopped and started that book a number of times. And the reason I stopped each time was I had made a commitment to myself. Do you know what speed dating is?
Yeah. It's coming back real strong right now.
So I said to myself, if we could have that kind of round table, I'm sitting at a table and somebody walks up and somebody else walks up, and each person to walk up at my table was an attorney who works for works for DOJ's tax division. Each one sits down and gets a question that I could dispose, if there was 100 of them, I could dispose of all of them like that. Mm-hmm. I said, until I have this information, command of this information, such that I could dispose of every single one of them, one after another, just like that. Until that, I can do that, I can't ask anybody to pay me for the material. Okay, kind of an ethics thing, right? So anyway, I finished the book, released it in 2010. So you remember all those little fiefdoms we talked about earlier, the 861, the Fifth Amendment, the zero returns, all of that. We were all a big community until I released Income Tax Shattering the Myths.
I remember you talking about this. I remember.
After that, I became a pariah amongst the promoters of their pet ideas. I became a pariah. And it's kind of odd because here we are in 2026, and there are people who know, and I'm not patting myself on the back because I don't consider that I've done anywhere near enough to get the truth out. Because, like, I'm not a marketing guy or anything, right? So I'm just doing what I know how to do. But there are people who know the sacrifices that I've made and what I've put into this effort. And because of what happened to their following, was translated into their money after Income Tax Shattering the Myths was released, they won't speak to me anymore.
No, I totally
and here I thought we were all on the same side. Yeah,
I get
that was
some
kind
of that too. So I definitely have firsthand experience. It's the people who have this following that have an income source, and they feel as though you're threatening the income source. Especially me, I'm giving away almost everything for free. That they feel ultra threatened because now it's like, gosh, how do I even compete against this guy? He's literally releasing material almost every single day, and it's all free. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do against that? You know, it's a pretty tough.
Yeah.
And I have empathy for that. I actually understand. I'm like, you're fucked, dude. Like, you are completely fucked against me. Like, you literally don't stand a chance. Like,
yeah.
I could be drunk, blindfolded, beaten half to death, and have my legs broken, and I'd still win without almost even the effort in any sort of one-on-one battle with any of these people. It's like, how do you even, you know? So they don't even attack me publicly because it's like they know it's like there's not even like a millimeter on this thing, you know.
It had never crossed my mind that releasing Income Tax Shattering the Myths was going to harm anybody else's revenue. Never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
So when those people became angry with me and no longer spoke to me, it was a shock. I didn't see that coming. My focus was not on harming anybody except the government in terms of its crime, its propaganda. Other than that, I had not set out to hurt anybody. So it was an unfortunate side effect, if you will, of Income Tax Shattering the Myths hitting the market.
Fascinating. But did you? So at that time, the tax honesty movement was still reeling after the 2008 collapse. So it was at one of its smallest points during that time period. So did you have a lot of people? Did you sell a ton of books and get like a following during that time period, or what was your outcome from your perspective?
Yeah, I was doing satellite radio back then, and I was within the genre of people who were speaking about things out of the norm, okay? Which today everybody is, right?
Oh,
That's
God,
kind of
I
like,
know. If you're not,
yeah.
you're weird in today's world.
Correct. But back then, I mean, you had people like Howard Stern.
Mm-hmm, yeah, yeah.
And then you had people like me on satellite, okay? And, you know, I was talking about gun rights. I was talking about liberty. I was talking about the income tax. But I had a pretty significant following. So considering what the collapse of the tax honesty movement in late 2008, like my first order of books, I think, was 1,000 copies, and they were all gone within like 2 weeks.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah, so that was not a bad, entree to first shot with the book.
Do you? I don't. The last time we talked, and you talked about this 2008 collapse, and it collapsed the tax honesty movement. I've had a lot of. That's kind of why I wanted to talk to you about on this show, and I think we're kind of getting to that point on the timeline. Sometimes, like after talking to you, I think to myself, if there was another 2008, would my platform collapse? You know, I've had that thought after we talked last time. I've had that thought several times, and I just there's a part of me. So you see all these different groups online, Facebook groups, and all this kind of stuff, right? And you go into these groups, and they are awful. I mean, so like literally, we're talking like I want to say horrible things, like things that would get me deplatformed. Like I don't even like if you lay down on train tracks, you'd be doing everyone a favor. Like shit like that. Like that's kind of where my mind goes, right? If you jumped off a building, you'd be healing the world, literally. Like that.
Yeah.
That's how bad these groups are, right? So people think that these groups are actually groups. And then the slightest little scarecrow, the slightest little boogeyman comes along, and they all scatter in all different directions. But the real piece of information is it was never a group. So when you say
Right.
when you say the tax honesty movement scattered in 2008, the first thing I think of is like these fucking Facebook groups, and then the first thing I think of is it's not a group. Like it's just a bunch of people who come together and it's just super surface level, and they've never done shit, and they don't know shit, and they just want to like talk or be retards, and that's it. So I guess my question is, you say the tax honesty movement was getting kind of strong and it was kind of heating up, moving up to 2008. What was it? In-person meetings? Was it what was it that gave you the indication that there was a strong base for a group there?
By 2008, the internet was a useful tool. Okay, so there was a lot of traffic talking about the truth of the income tax. There were a lot of in-person meetings. That doesn't really take place anymore. But yes, I mean, there were study groups all over the place. Have you heard of Richard McDonald?
Of course. Okay. Great, fantastic guy. Okay. Probably one of my favorites of all time, honestly, frankly. He was in Van Nuys.
Yeah, well, sort of, yeah. Richard lived up a canyon in the mountains going from where I lived in Chatsworth in the San Fernando Valley. There was a canyon that went over into Simi.
Okay.
And his home was on the Chatsworth side.
Okay.
And it was absolute trip. It had a giant tree growing up in the middle of the living room up to the roof. And he had this massive library of law books. And I used to spend a lot of time. But Richard would have been a good example of people who were leading study groups.
Yes.
Okay. Which was a thing back then.
Well, he had the books and I have all of his stuff on my website for free to download. He had all his books. Yeah. He had all the different like binder, like spiral bound binder book type stuff. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, and he was, what did he tried to create some government, I don't know, something of Mossadegh or something, some jurisdiction, and get an embassy and diplomatic place and all that stuff. So I
didn't realize he went down that road.
He did.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that.
And it's so funny because for people who didn't spend time with him, I mean, I would literally go up to his house, pull up in the driveway, go inside, and start researching stuff and asking him questions if I didn't have answers. And he didn't mind. It was like, I have a guest in my library. That's how he viewed it, not I have a guest in my house, right? And so, but if Richard thought you were being stupid, he was not in that moment the most congenial person. He'd be like,
that's hilarious.
He'd be like, do you want to reevaluate that question? You want to think about that for a minute before you tell me that's really the question you want to ask me? And I think there was a little bit of theater in that on his part. What he was trying to do was to get you to think it through a bit further before you ask a question. Yes, you can come to me with that question, but maybe you should not come to me with that question. Maybe you should go do some more homework.
Yeah.
But he was a cantankerous old coot, and I loved him because he just a brilliant, dynamic mind. But he was cantankerous.
He was brilliant. I've seen a lot of his videos. Very, very. He's one of the few people that were like considered gurus in this movement that I wish I could have met.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I was very lucky. It was just proximity.
Like, because you guys were in the same.
20 minutes from my house to his house.
Yeah. So 2010, this thing releases, and then you see a build up, like you said, between 2010 and 2018, and then we move into COVID. What do you see? What happened to the movement during COVID? Because I was not a part of any of this until 2022, so I don't really know those first 2 years.
Nothing happened because people all the ways that people were communicating by the time COVID hit, those means of communication were still open.
Okay.
Nobody was doing in-person meetings anymore. Very few people were doing in-person meetings anymore. It was all Zoom or email groups or whatever technology they wanted to utilize. So it really didn't take a hit at all. And now, as we're sitting here talking at the beginning of 2026, the number of people involved and the curiosity level and the willingness to say, yeah, fuck them,
It's crazy.
is the highest I've ever seen in my life. And I think,
crazy.
since you brought it up, I think COVID has something to do with that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I think a lot of people who might have been a little bit chill at one point, like, well, you know, if the government's doing this, they probably think they're doing the right thing, you know what. And then I think after COVID, they were like, no, the government is completely corrupt. They don't care about us. They don't care about our rights. They're dictatorial, you know, all the censorship, right? Stay-at-home orders, shuttering private businesses. I think a lot of people at that point said,
Treason.
I will never, ever respect or trust the government again. I think COVID did that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And sort of the irony is that's how I imagine 100% of the readers of Income Tax Shattering the Myths feel when they close that final chapter.
Yeah.
Is whatever thoughts they might have had about the government, when they're done with Income Tax Shattering the Myths, they're like, they're nothing but a bunch of lying, thieving sons of bitches.
Yeah.
And I'll never trust them again. That's the change that Income Tax Shattering the Myths brings about, I'm imagining, in 100% of the people who read it.
Oh yeah, I mean, the person to read this kind of a book, I think, would already have to be kind of in that camp, at least at the front door of that camp, to even read the damn thing, because you'd have to have enough personal motivation to move through that amount of information, which is a mountain of information. But yeah, I mean, by the end, there's no question about it, because the tax arena opens the doors to what else is going on that is like this. That's I think it's like a gateway drug or gateway. It's a gateway. The tax situation is an excellent gateway, because I do state citizenship, I do U.S. citizenship, I do negotiable instruments versus money, I do all these different areas, right? And I use the tax stuff up front all the time as like a gateway to everything else, because it's just something that is so personal and it's so effective, and you can make change in someone's life overnight practically by going down the tax route, because with almost no effort, really the only effort is just understanding what it is that you're looking at. You check a couple boxes or you move a couple things around, and bang, you've got 30% of your income, 40% of your income, or here in California, I'd say 50% of your income returned to you. That's a big deal.
Yeah, and if you use that as the entree, it touches everybody.
Oh, that's right. That's why I use
Yeah.
it. I lead with the tax discussion because it really is, in my opinion, the best leading discussion. It is the entry discussion, pretty much, for literally anybody, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the door to walk through.
So where do you see this going? We've got World War III looming overhead. We have the Epstein files. The Epstein files has caused a massive explosion in traffic on my shit. I think the Epstein files is essentially taking all that disgust and aggravation you were referring to from COVID, taking that and then just sending it through a massive amplifier. And I think the Epstein files, that amplification, I don't even think we've really seen it yet. I think we've seen a little bit of it, but I think, like COVID, I think there's going to be a little bit of a delay, and then all of a sudden it's going to be like a fucking monstrous avalanche. I think the Epstein files is still processing.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's that's an area where that's a subject, not Epstein per se, but that activity is something that a lot of people feel very passionately about.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, of course.
And the people who have that passion, they believed that the truth was going to come out. So by the Epstein administration working overtime to make sure the file never gets out, I don't know if you saw the reporting out of the UK. They got emails from attorneys within DOJ writing to one another and saying that part of their problem in doing what they had been tasked to do was that the Epstein file was 5 terabytes.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay, so if that's true, which it appears to be, that means Bondi's released 2%.
Yes, I saw that, yes. And
So
the creepiest part is the main area on the timeline of missing files is right around 9/11, and there's conspiracies as regards to the fact that because the Epstein files have damning evidence regarding 9/11.
Yeah. And, I know a lot of people who feel passionately about the whole subject matter addressed in the Epstein documents. I know a lot of those are Trump supporters. So they're...
Well, you're a huge Trump fan, so that's,
Oh, yes, yeah. So one of the
joke,
things...
by the way, for people who may not be aware.
One of the things that got scrubbed, apparently, by DOJ was an allegation made by a 14-year-old against Donald Trump.
Yes, I heard about this.
And, it should not matter whether you were an Obama guy, whether you were a Bush guy, whether you're a Trump guy, whether you're going to, whoever you're going to like in the next election, right? I'd like to see people step away from that when they're considering sexually abusing underage kids. I'd like to see them step away from their politics.
Yeah.
And say, I don't care who fucking did it.
I think what's happening in society, because I definitely went through it, and I think I'm probably still going through it, is it's just, I was aware that things were bad. Don't get me wrong. I've been aware that things are bad since I watched Zeitgeist in 2007. It's just... Wow. It's just a lot. That was my wake up, by the way. That was my literal wake up. That was it.
Right?
Holy
that was a great movie.
Jesus! That was like getting hit with like a fucking cinder block. I'm not even kidding. It was like literally getting hit with a cinder block. I getting hit with a car. I ended up watching it like 50 times over the course of like 2 weeks, just over and over and over. I just couldn't even. I was like short circuiting, right? But I think that might be what everyone's kind of going through right now. And that's why I see all these videos of like, you're not angry enough and all this stuff, and we're trying to get, and I don't think people are like, oh, they're not doing anything, we're not doing anything, we should be angry about blah, blah. I don't think that's really what's going on. I think what's going on is there's this stasis of like, holy fuck, like, and the information hasn't even really been processed. It's almost like a processing bar, like back when we had like dial-up internet and you watched a song download and it took like 4 hours.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I feel like that's like what's happening right now. So I don't get too mad at people. I don't freak out too much because I just don't. It's like COVID. During COVID, everyone's yelling, screaming, all this stuff. We should be doing this. We should be doing that. Well, here we are 5 years later. A lot of that stuff that everyone was trying to get everybody to do, we are doing. It just had this like lag to it.
Absolutely.
So the thing is that I think the Epstein files is even worse than COVID in a lot of ways, because it's so shocking and it's so appalling and it's so unjustifiable compared to all the justifications and all the reasoning behind COVID. Made it seem maybe they had the whole world kind of set up in this way to like make it okay, make it justified, right? There's nothing justified.
It's in your best interest.
Yeah, there's nothing justified about the Epstein files. Wasn't even there's nothing, like there's no like PR campaign, there's no dancing nurses, there's no fluffy there's no free cheeseburgers. The mayor of New York, oh, you mean I get this cheeseburger when I get the vaccine? Oh, cool. Oh, I get this fries. Nothing. There's no marketing, there's no campaign to try to soothe It's just like a baseball bat crushing blow straight to your mouth, and your teeth are all gone, and you just haven't even had a chance to even process it. I think that's kind of what's going on, and I think that this huge, monstrous wave is sort of building inside of this like processing center, and I don't think we'll see it for another year or two. But man, I think when it comes crashing down, and there's a part of me that wonders, boy, we sure are moving into these wars fast. Is it because they're trying to prevent what they know is coming? That's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about. Where do you see this going, especially based off of all of your experience? There's not that many guys that have been in these spaces for 30 years. You're one of how many that are even still alive?
Yeah.
So from your experience of seeing and living all of this more than almost anybody else available to talk to, where do you see us going in the next, let's say, 4 years? 4 years.
Wow.
It's funny because here we are. 4 years sounds like 30 years. If I would ask you that question in 1993, 4 years, like nothing. But I ask you in 2026, 4 years, might as well be 40 years.
So somebody asked me today if I thought, given the mindset of the American people, if I thought that things were going to get this bad this fast, okay? And I want to share with your audience what I shared with him. I said my first exposure to like some form of like political insanity thought was after Obama had been elected. There was a news crew that went into a black neighborhood, lower economic black neighborhood, and the reporter walked up to a black woman and said, "Ma'am, how do you feel about Barack Obama becoming president?" And she said, "Oh my God, it is so great. Now I ain't never going to have to pay my rent again." Okay. That was the first time I'd ever heard somebody make a completely insane statement connected to a politician. Because Obama's going to be sworn in January, I'm not going to have to pay rent anymore on the place I live. Okay. And at the time, I thought that was merely an aberration. What I didn't understand is it was a harbinger. So now, and it doesn't seem to matter what side of the fence you're on, this insane way of thinking, it's permeated so much of American society. And, I've tried to consider what may have been causing it. And I know a lot of people say it's social media, and they may not be wrong about that. Because social media does give people the freedom to say things from behind a keyboard they would never say if they were standing face to face with people. So it does free the mind, so to speak, to make the most insane statements. Because if you and I were talking privately, okay, and I said, "Brandon, you're a fucking idiot," you would stop and go, "What did I just say that Dave Champion would say that to me?" You would take a moment and reflect. Okay? And either you would say, "Maybe I deserve that," or "Maybe I need to step away from Champion because he's losing it." Okay? But you would evaluate that. Okay? Because you have some respect for me, and vice versa. If you said something like that to me, I'd have to take a step back and say, wait, if Brandon's speaking to me like that, what did I say to bring the conversation to that point? Okay? That doesn't exist in society anymore now that everybody's behind a keyboard. So somebody says the most outrageous thing and somebody else says, "You're a fucking idiot," and they just go right past it. It doesn't impact them. They don't care that it may be true. They're talking like a fucking idiot. Okay?
It's like these groups.
Yes, very much so. And then the thing that concerns me, though, is, that woman who said she wasn't going to have to pay rent anymore because Obama was elected. People who say, things that Donald Trump does It's not that he's being petulant or egomaniacal or anything. It's 5D chess, okay? They vote. So when you ask me where we're going to be in 4 years from now, I don't know, because it all comes back to the people. AIPAC, right? The Jewish organization. Right? Okay.
Yep.
So a lot of people have a lot of negative things to say about AIPAC. Okay. And I shared recently, it's really not about them. It's about America's Christian fundamentalists.
Yeah.
Who believe that the God Almighty gave Palestine to the Hebrews, and then somehow they come to the idea that the people who are living there, who typically are considered quote-unquote Jewish, whatever the hell that means these days, okay?
Yeah.
That there's Jews living in Palestine, and then these fundamental Christian Americans are like, if you say, and I'm not taking any political position about this, these are hypothetical statements, okay? If somebody says the United States should not fund Israel anymore, okay? Then the Christian fundamentalists are, well, God damn it, you're against Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ wants them Jews in Palestine, okay? And most elections are very close. So it doesn't take much for somebody who could have won an election to end up losing an election. And that's what AIPAC, in my opinion, that's what AIPAC focuses on, okay? They'll tell a congressperson, you don't want to vote that way. Because if you do, we're going to make sure that the newspapers and radio stations in your district leading up to the elections tell the Christian fundamentalists in your community that you don't love God and you're not a Christian. You hate Jews and you hate Israel. Because you hate Israel, you hate God. And they're not going to vote for you. They're going to vote for the other guy. So then I ask people, then where does AIPAC's power come from? It comes from Americans who are that easily manipulated on that particular issue. And again, I'm not making a political statement or a biblical statement or anything. This is a practical statement about what the source of the manipulation is. It is that there are people out there who are easily manipulated into no longer voting for this guy or that guy because they have fundamental Christian views about Israel. Okay? And I think there's a lot of people who would say the Israel of the Bible is different than the Israel of 2026. But to Christian fundamentalists, most of them, there is no difference.
But there seems to be a collapsing of anyone having any interest or trust in anything having to do with either side of the political party from people on both. We're talking about Republicans and Democrats are both losing complete trust and any sort of support for any of it.
Yes.
It's sort of like crumbling, it's almost like a bridge that's just like crumbling into dust.
I would agree with you right up until Election Day.
Okay.
And then they'll rush to the polls to make sure the other guy doesn't win.
Okay.
Which is, as far as I'm 66. In my lifetime, the vast majority of voters aren't really voting for somebody that they really dig. They're voting against the people they really hate.
Yeah. So do you think in come April, we're going to see this gigantic, monstrous wave of people not filing or filing exempt or whatever? Do you think that this thing is really going to catch this year? Did you see the new W4, I think it is, that has the exempt box now, the huge checkable exempt box? So people can actually visually see it without having to go down to the instructions?
Which is a trap.
Yeah, because exempt, I understand that, but there's a lot of attention on that right now, is my point.
The reason it's a trap is because the IRS has something called a Withholding Compliance Program. It's a Withholding Compliance Program office. They are a little tiny self-contained group of guys with a big fucking computer. Okay? And what they've been doing, and boy, they've really ramped their numbers up in the last couple of years. they're sending, you know what a lock-in letter is?
I was going to mention that because I've been seeing a lot of these, like within the last, we're talking fucking 3 weeks. I've seen this explosion of lock-in letters.
Yes. So, and that's been growing. So you're seeing the apex. Okay?
But still, compared to the amount of people going exempt, shall we say, just to keep it the terminology correct, it's still a very, very, very small percentage of lock-in letters. But I think because you have this, shall we say, hundreds of thousands, maybe, I think that's pretty fair and conservative to say I'm seeing that kind of a thing very, very possibly for exemptions, W-4 exempt.
I would agree.
I've seen, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 lock-in letters, but I never really saw those before, so it seems like an explosion, but really, numerically, it's not really an explosion. It's just an explosion relative to where it was, let's say, 6 months ago. That's my point.
Correct. Well, relative to where it was about 2 years ago, they've been arcing it up. And so what they're trying to do now, and believe me, I've been watching these sons of bitches for 3 decades, what they're trying to do by making that exempt box more prominent is get more people to click it. And so sometime over the next 12, 24, 36 months after they check exempt, their employer gets a lock-in letter. So the person went exempt, they're not filing, okay? So all of a sudden, they're having withholding occur to them, being done to them at the highest possible rate. They have no way to get it back because they're not filing. So what they're doing is they're building in a punishment mechanism. If you want to get out of the system, but you work for somebody else, we are going to punish you. We are going to make you pay. We're going to hurt you. And that's government. I was going to say it's the IRS, but it's that would be narrowing it in a big way. That's what government does. If you learn the truth and you don't like what we're doing, and you try and step away, we're going to hurt you. And in my opinion, that's what they're doing with making exempt more prominent on the W-4.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you have that viewpoint. I had that viewpoint for the first couple of years when I was doing all this stuff. But as I talked to more people and as I experienced more things and as I learned more things, not to downplay it, not to say that treason isn't being committed, because it is. Let's be honest. I mean, you don't need to. Just because it's not preconceived doesn't necessarily mean it's not treason. Is my point, right? I think a lot of it's just ignorance. I don't really. I think the entire government's
on whose part?
On the government's part. Like I view the government as almost like this giant runaway train that no one's been driving and no one knows how to drive, and it's just kind of driving itself. And like, again, I'm not justifying it. It is treason, but I think the it's not preconceived. Like, these people are not
at the employee level.
That's what I think even
I did
even
a video
going up many levels. It seems like
about 5 months ago, maybe. I did a video where I discussed who at the IRS and the Treasury Department knows the truth. And you are correct in that out of the 100,000 employees of the Internal Revenue Service, perhaps a dozen people at the top know the truth. And it's not the commissioner.
I was going to say, I don't even think the commissioner knows. I was going to say. Absolutely
not. Absolutely. Because they're political appointees. The chief counsel for the IRS, they don't know because they're political appointees. The guys that know
are the top lawyers. It's got to be the top lawyers. Those guys for sure know.
And the people that are in charge, the IRS calls it the compliance division, okay? But it's actually, the word that would be more accurately descriptive is the enforcement division, okay? They call it compliance. That's a PR name. Compliance equals enforcement. The guy who's in charge of enforcement and a couple of the people who work for him have to know.
Yeah.
And let me explain why. You've read my book, so you're familiar with the Bruce Shaber decision.
I may need a little refresher.
Sure. Okay. 1916 Supreme Court is looking at the very first case that challenged the income tax post 16th Amendment. All right. And so in that case, Justice White, writing for the court, says income tax in its nature is an excise entitled to be enforced as such.
I remember this now.
Until the method of enforcement, and at this point I'm not going to be able to quote any further, but basically he says the method of enforcement converts it to a direct tax absent apportionment, which that would be unconstitutional.
Yes.
That doesn't exist.
Yes.
Okay. That's not the income tax statutes. So basically he said, and an excise, for your listeners who aren't aware, an excise is a tax upon a government-granted privilege.
Such as operating through a corporation, operating through some sort of...
That's not an income tax privilege. That's just a privilege in your state. Okay. So remember we've talked about the three classes upon whom the tax has been imposed?
Yes.
Non-resident aliens with U.S. source income, foreign corporations with U.S. source income, and U.S. citizens, U.S. residents, or domestic corporations who have chosen to act as the domestic agents for non-resident aliens or foreign corporations with U.S. source income.
Yes.
Okay? So those are the three classes. The privilege, there's all sorts of privileges. I've spoken to people who say, well, I drive a truck and I have a commercial license from the Federal Department of Transportation, so I have a privilege. I guess I owe income tax. Motherfucker, that's not the privilege. Okay, so the privilege upon which the income tax has been imposed is foreign persons receiving U.S. source income.
Yeah.
Period. Full stop. And it's the people who act as the Americans who act as the foreign guy's domestic agent.
The withholding agent.
The withholding agent, yes. They have been made liable.
Okay, yes.
So the tax hasn't been imposed on them, but they've been made liable.
They're like the trustees, sort of.
In a sense, yes. Actually, I forget the code section now. 7553? I forget. It's been too long. There's actually a code that says when a withholding agent withholds the U.S. income tax from the U.S. source income belonging to his foreign principal, that 7551, it creates a trust in the interest of the United States.
So the United States would be the beneficiary, and the withholding agent would be the trustee, and the res of the trust would be that of which
tax
has been withheld and taxed and needs to be routed.
There you go.
Makes perfect sense.
Stated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually there was a court that the Supreme Court examined that peripherally, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, and said that at some time they're going to have to re-examine, if I have the code section right after all these years, 7551, I could have it, I could be wrong. But the whole, it creates a trust. The court said, we're going to have to re-examine that because there's no such thing as an automatic trust.
Well,
in other words, Congress can't just wave its magic wand and say, Brandon, you've now created a trust without knowing it.
Well, it's called an implied trust. That's interesting because there is an implied trust. It does exist.
But
there's
not
certain
because
rules.
the government says so.
Yeah, there's certain rules as to they've made a lot of statutory rules as to how that can happen and how it can't happen. But anyways, I mean, a certificate of trust for a car is an implied trust.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. The court said about a major aspect of the withholding regime or regimen. We're going to have to look at this again down the road because this doesn't smell right.
What I find so fascinating about it is the trustees not being compensated, to my knowledge.
They're not?
And that's the part that's the weirdest part to me.
Yeah.
Because I remember seeing somewhere in the Internal Revenue Code talking about how, like, a person's an employee or something, even if they're not receiving compensation. It's like part of one of the definitions of something having to do with employee or employed or something. It literally says in the definition that them being compensated does not necessarily mean that they're not.
Right.
The whole thing is just so goofy. Trader business is the goofiest. That's to me, that's the goofiest of the goofies. Yes.
And I'll share an interesting thought with you. I think virtually everybody who reads Trader Business and understands that it applies to the function of a government worker, right?
A public office.
Public office, thank you. I think that they think that means a United States public office. It means any public office for any nation.
You know, I've brought the trader business thing up a lot because I personally find it so insane and so obvious and so fucking ridiculous that it makes me laugh every time I think about it. Literally, I just start fucking laughing. You ever seen 26 USD 162 that talks about every single one of the trade or business expenses?
Yes.
So I always tell people, they go, oh, well, the word includes on trader business. You know how it is. Trader business says includes the functions of a public office. Right. So, it includes, right? Every attorney, DOJ attorney, City of Glendale attorney, it's always the same discussion. It's the word includes, right?
There's other things unmentioned.
Yeah. So I love your stuff, and I've used it. But I also kind of developed another thing that I like to use. So I have two kinds of like guns in my holster. I have that one, the one that you talk about. And then I have another one, which is the fact that a definition, literally the definition of the word definition is limitations or boundaries of meaning. So I always tell, I've kind of tested a bunch of different things with these attorneys. And the one that I found actually works the best is I say, well, Mr. Whoever, if what you're saying is correct, then by definition, it's not a definition. Because it doesn't limit or boundary the meanings of the term. And boy, dude, I'm telling you, use that on some attorneys and CPAs. They literally, it's like their soul literally leaves their body. Like you can't talk to them after that. Like right. they literally short circuit so hard, it's like a freaking robot. And the sparks flying out of like every inch of their body. It's thing is amazing.
When something is so, there's so much brevity, like with trade and business, right? Includes the function of a public office. What is that, like 5 words, right? And then they say, well, there's other things.
Business, dude.
Yeah, there's other things. So my thing is, let me see if I understand you. I tell them, what you're telling me is that there is an unknown meaning for trade or business.
Trade or business.
And you get to decide what it is, and your secretary gets to decide what it is, and the box boy at the grocery store gets to decide what it is, because there's just other things.
It's endless.
Right, it's absurd.
Oranges. You know, hey, this bottle, why not? Includes, why not? Why couldn't it include the bottle?
Here's my trade or business right here. Yeah, it's the idea that the law means something never mentioned, that anybody can fill in the blank.
They don't even know the definition of the word definition.
No, they don't.
That's how bad things are, guys. I'm telling you, these people don't even know the definition of the word definition. I swear to God. I've asked attorneys, what's the definition of definition? And they, oh my God! It's like they act like you're either God or you're trying to kill them. There's no.
No, you're trying to kill their bank account. That's what you're trying to do.
Unbelievable.
That's how they see that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
What's the definition?
Remember I told you the story about where the guy made up that thing that there's an emergency in my office and I'll have to call you later and hung up. A week later, he never did call me back. A week later, he sent his client cut and paste crap off the IRS's website.
The frivolous tax arguments page, that one?
Probably, yeah. But it's just, these guys have nothing. And the part that irks me about this, Brandon, is they have nothing. Okay, fair enough. You've made a career out of shit talking because you're ignorant. And everybody believes you because, it says Esquire after your name. Okay, so, but my thing is...
But you don't know what a definition is.
When you corner them with the actual law, I would like to think that anybody who has character or integrity would say, you know what? I'm not sure I agree with what I just heard, but it is the first time anybody's pointed that out to me. So let me do a little bit of research. How about we talk tomorrow? That's what a person with character and integrity would do.
I feel like that's a generational thing. I feel like your generation and older generations, you guys would like allow people to like have time to like process shit.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like if I can't jam it down your throat in 6 minutes, like something's wrong and everybody's fucking trying to, it's just crazy. You know what I mean? It's like nobody lets anybody else process anything. It's like COVID. Obviously, people have to process crazy ass shit that shatters their entire fucking reality. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Like, we should be giving each other the ability to process some of this information when we share it. I think it should be something that the person on the other end should be able to say, hey, I need to process this. My head's going to fucking explode. I have had people tell me that. But at the same time, we should also be willing to let people process this information. You can't. This stuff is so crazy and huge and monstrous.
Did I ever tell you the first thing that tipped me off about the mRNA injections?
No.
That we were not being told the truth. I don't know if you know, I have a background in physiology. So the thing that got me was when they said that the lipid nanoparticles are going to remain at the injection site. Okay, well, one of two things had to be true.
You're going off the deep end with me. I don't know what a lipid nanoparticle is.
Lipid nanoparticle. We're talking about things that are
toxic,
like the size of a red blood cell.
Okay.
Okay, that's how small they are. And they literally, the actual messenger RNA was encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle. Okay, so it had to be protected. So you can see the lipid nanoparticle as the vessel in which there was cargo. Okay, all of this like the size of a red blood cell. Mm-hmm. Okay, but they said that it's going to the lipid nanoparticles. We know what's going to happen with the mRNA. We know what's going to happen. It's going to transcribe. It's going to put one of the S-spike proteins on the exterior of the cell and so forth. And we know that. Okay. But then they said the lipid nanoparticles are going to stay at the injection site. Really? And my thought was, no, they're going to travel in the blood. Unless Pfizer or Moderna wants to tell me that they have created a hitherto unknown technology that somehow anchors a lipid nanoparticle to the tissue that it first contacts in the body. Okay, so there's only two options here. Either there is this hitherto unknown technology that you have invented and you have placed in this product, and for some reason you don't want to take credit for that, which is insane because of course they would. Okay, so that's possibility A. And possibility B, the only other possibility, there is no C, is you're fucking lying, and those lipid nanoparticles are going to travel throughout the body. Well, of course, we know from research today, here we are in 2026, that they do. They travel throughout the body. They've been found in every single organ and part of the tissue in the body. Okay, but that was the tip-off for me, that because they were not screaming from the rooftops, we invented a great new technology that anchors the lipid nanoparticles to the tissue. Well, if you're not telling me that, then you're lying about them staying in the injection site. And as soon as I realized that, I was like, okay, whatever all else they may be claiming about this now has to be suspect. Because one of the top 3 points of their sales pitch is a fucking lie. If they're lying about that, then I can't believe them about anything else. And of course, now we know that probably 98% of everything they said was a lie.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to go back and pull out the contracts. People don't realize that there's these little tiny itty bitty contracts on the sides of a lot of those bottles and stuff like that, or on the sides of the thing, and you peel it off. You peel off the plastic sticky thing, and you have to pull it out, and you can unfold, and it's about this big. And it was like the contract associated with it, and I guarantee you, it only applies to persons, and there's probably all sorts of 14th Amendment related terminology in the contract. But we're getting off track here. Back to the original question. Where do you see this next 4 years going?
I wish I had a good answer. I don't. I sort of have an if A or if B answer. If people, the American people, can pull back from this insane extremist way of thinking, that no matter what they say, it's true. No matter what they say, it's factual. No matter what they say is the way the world's got to fucking be because I said so. Okay. Unless they can back away from that, we're going down, in my opinion. Because people who cannot stop and say, wait, what I say doesn't necessarily always, it's not always necessarily factual. Just because I said it doesn't make it the cat's meow. All right? That people who have a different viewpoint than me don't hate America. That's right. That's the liberals say that the conservatives hate America, and the conservatives say the liberals hate America. I know a lot of liberals and a lot of conservatives. Guess what? Not one of them hates America.
Yeah.
They have different views of what will make America the best it could possibly be, but they don't hate it. Okay. So we've got this weird my team phenomenon, and in addition to it's my team has to win, it's my thoughts are valid at all times. Everything I say is true. Every crazy theory I put out there without a shred of evidence is factual, and if you say otherwise, you're a cocksucker. Okay? Unless the American people can back away from that way of thinking, I hate to say things that are dramatic, but I would see perhaps civil war in our future.
In the next 4 years? Or longer?
It could be any time. Unless people can back away from...
Because AI is making what you're talking about worse.
I'm sorry?
AI is making what you're talking about right now worse.
Okay.
I don't know if you've noticed that.
I don't know how it can be making things worse, but I'll take your word for that. I don't have anything to do with AI because it's nonsense. But
I use it to find things for me. It's very, very, very... Like you have all these books behind you. I use AI all the time. Find me this case. Find me that case. Find me a case talking about this. Find me a case talking about that. And then I just go off and I read it. So it's basically like my librarian. That's the way I use AI.
It's a sophisticated search engine.
It's a sophisticated... it's literally my librarian. It's like, where in this and where is this? And is there Justice to talk? I could be like, Ward Hunt, tell me everything Justice Ward Hunt said about citizenship between the years, 1869 and 1881. And it'll be like, this date, this case, this is what he said. This date, this case, this is what he said. I mean, it's crazy. Wild.
Yeah, and that's what it's good for. All this other stuff that are...
No, I know. Everything else is... That's why I'm bringing it up, because it seems like people use AI to further justify whatever it is they think or want to say.
Exactly. I cannot tell you how many times people have said, well, Grok says, or ChatGPT
That's what I mean.
Said. Okay.
Yeah.
And Grok is particularly bad because who's ever programming Grok has programmed it to be obstinate even when the facts would indicate to any rational entity that it's wrong.
Yeah.
And so, Grok is, in my opinion, the worst of the worst. Then you've got the other side of the coin, like ChatGPT. It was so sycophantic, it was sickening, and they had to tone that down.
Yeah.
If it would say, if ChatGPT said the sun rises in the west, so you say, well, actually, no, here's the science. The sun rises in the east. ChatGPT says, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to give you an incorrect answer. And you're absolutely right. Thank you for clarifying that for me, right? So they had to tone that shit down. So you've got that side, and then you've got Grok that's just a little bit shy of, even when you're right and it's wrong, it's just a little bit shy of telling you, fuck you, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So, what value is that? And I encourage people, and I know this show isn't about AI, I encourage people to keep in mind that AI does not think. I believe people think it thinks. It doesn't. It's a sophisticated search engine. It's nothing more than that.
I couldn't agree more. I think, and I mentioned it a lot, I don't think people should be using it for right/wrong related evaluations. It's literally,
Correct.
think of AI as the sexy librarian. That's it.
That's a great way to see
That's
it.
all I do. It's just a hottie brunette librarian. That's it. In a pencil skirt. That's all it is. Hey, honey, come here. I have a question for you. I'm looking for this, and this guy may have said something, and I need some years on this, and was there any case that overturned this, and, blah, 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 blah. And AI essentially you don't need things like Westlaw with AI.
Yes. The only thing we have to be careful of with AI is hallucinations.
Yeah, I don't see those anymore. I saw those a lot before, but I hardly ever see those anymore. I think they finally fixed a lot of that. That was a big issue a while ago. I've seen a couple of recent cases where some attorneys were sanctioned for having hallucinations, and I'm like, how did you even get those in the way AI is today? It's so much better than it was a year, 2 years ago. Like, I don't even know how you'd get the thing to hallucinate anymore.
Yeah.
Weird. But anyways, people are just that stupid. So
let's have some fun.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Snipes.
Yes. So I wanted to. So one of the reasons. Well, here let's tie it in. Let's just bridge it over. So as I'm sure Dave's aware, but I'm definitely aware. Every time you bring up the income tax, it's always the same response. It's always been the same response for me, Wesley Snipes. That's always been the response, right? Up until recently, I haven't been getting that like at all, because this whole income tax thing is like exploding. I've gotten much more of like a either kind of neutral reaction or a positive reaction and a curious reaction. But I'll tell you what, the amount of times I hear Wesley Snipes, which used to be 95%, I would say it's fallen all the way down to maybe 5% of the time I hear it now, which is amazing. It's a huge change. But with that said, what I wanted to do today with Dave live on the show is I wanted to go into the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals case of U.S. v. Snipes. This is from the 11th Circuit in 2010, and you can see it on my screen, right, Dave?
I can't read anything. It's so tiny, but yes, I can see it.
Okay, we will read it, but I'm also going to increase the size. So this is the, let me, that's not going to work.
I'm going to let you be my librarian and read to me.
Yeah, right. So defendant Wesley Trent Snipes appeals from his criminal convictions after a jury trial on 3 counts of willful failure to file individual federal income tax returns for calendar years 99, 2000, and 2001 in violation of 26 U.S.C. 7203. You're probably more familiar with that than I am. 7203. Yep. Just a quick peek here. 26 U.S.C. 7203. Willful failure to file return.
Mm-hmm.
Supply information or pay tax. Any person required under this title to pay any estimated tax or tax are required by this title or by regulations made under authority thereof to make a return, keep records, supply information. Okay.
So let me just interject here for a moment to be clear about 7203. That pertains to the entire Title 26.
Okay.
And there are taxes in Title 26, as you well know, other than income tax. That's just one part of the whole entire tax code, right? So when it says, failure to file, provide information, and so forth, that is generic across the board for all the taxes that are contained in Title 26, of which income tax is one.
All the trades or businesses?
Yeah. But I mean, it deals with, gaming taxes, and it deals with inheritance tax, and it deals with all sorts of other the United States government has, last time I looked, it's probably much higher now, like 203 different taxes. They're not all in Title 26, but it's got like 203 taxes.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Wow, okay. So Snipes alleges that the trial court committed reversible error in sentencing, jury instructions, and on issues of venue. This is really, really weak positions for a fucking appeal, especially with all the stuff that I think he brought up during this case. That sounds like a bar card issue there. After thorough review, we affirm the rulings and judgment of the district court in all respects. Now, I want to say one thing on this for me. An appeals court will only look at the things that they bring to the appeals court. That's what people don't understand. You can say all this stuff in the district court, and if you don't bring all that stuff up into the appeals court, they're only going to look at what you bring into the opening brief. People are so weird. Like, nobody knows that.
And you have to preserve an error in the trial court record
By filing an objection.
Correct.
So if you don't do that, I guess for whatever reason, either they didn't do that or they're just dumb, because it looks like they had 3 things they brought to appeals, and they're all sound kind of goofy to me, but let's take a look at what it says here.
They are non-persuasive, I'll say that.
They just seem, it's like someone's just shooting from the hip for a prayer. The essential facts at trial and the procedural history are these. He's a movie actor. Snipes is a movie actor and owner of a film production company, including Amen Raw Films and Kimber Light Productions. Sometime around the year 2000, Snipes became involved in co-defendant Eddie Ray Khan's organization called American Rights Litigators, ARL, that purported to assist customers in resisting the Internal Revenue. Are you familiar with this American Rights Litigators?
Uh-huh.
What was that all about?
It evaporated after this case.
Makes sense.
Because, and this has taken place so many times over the last 3 decades. These arguments, or these organizations which normally rely on a given argument, okay, they build up a clientele, a client base, and then eventually the leader of that enterprise or one of their clients gets prosecuted, and then nobody will touch them ever again. So that's what happened to ALR.
How long was ARL around?
Long time. Eddie Khan,
Oh.
I think I heard his name in '93 when I first got in the movement.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Continuing on, ARL employees, including co-defendant Douglas Rosile and ARL members, sent voluminous letters to the IRS challenging the agency's authority to collect taxes. The centerpiece of this resistance was the 861 argument.
Can I interrupt that first part of the statement there?
Yeah.
Challenging the IRS's authority to collect taxes. That's like challenging the legislature's authority to sit in the legislative chamber. I mean, it's an absurd position.
You're saying that the court got it wrong, or you're saying the people who brought this appeal were idiots? I'm
saying that Eddie Khan and the employees mentioned in the appeal, if they were, prior to this all getting to the point of going to trial, these letters that you just read that they were sending to the government, claiming that the IRS did not have authority to collect taxes. That's an absurd argument.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Because
you remember Erwin Schiff?
I mean, so many people have brought him up, and I've looked him up a couple times, and his stuff just seems so weird and goofy. I didn't even want to really go down the rabbit hole, but I'm aware of his name. Yeah, I often
refer to him. I often refer to him as the grandpappy of the tax honesty movement. He was actually interviewed on like NBC News and stuff like that. So that's kind of how he got a name, because he gained some mainstream access. And one of his statements was, there is no requirement in the tax code to file a return. What? And it's a completely, I mean, I loved Erwin. He was such a wonderful man. But that's just a boneheaded statement. And I put that thing, the IRS doesn't have the authority to collect taxes, in the same boneheaded category. Of course it has the authority to collect taxes.
If you're a
The question
taxpayer,
is what taxes and from whom?
if you're a taxpayer, if you fall under the definition of the word person, you fall under the definition of the word taxpayer, your activities fall under the definition of a trade or business, and the location of said trade or business falls within the definition of United States and states, they absolutely have the right to collect taxes. They absolutely have the right to hit you with a willful failure, unwilling to pay taxes. You know, that's the part that I think people don't understand. There's this middle ground, and there's been, anyways. Yeah, I totally get it.
So I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify that argument on their behalf was nonsense.
Yeah. And this is why I like to look at these things, because people assume that the attorneys behind these cases brought these like absolutely flawless cases into the courts, and then they lost, and then they brought this absolutely flawless appeal to the 11th Circuit. That's the part that I think people just... These cases aren't even close to anything coherent. They're awful. Sometimes I wonder if it was just the attorneys trying to get paid, frankly. It's just so bad.
And there's a large difference, too, between the arguments presented by the defense in most any tax case. The arguments put on by the defense and the evidence that the government brings in that convinces the jury. Okay, now, the jury in tax cases, I have to be very clear, are 12 people who are as ignorant as the day is long about taxes.
Yeah.
But the reason the government wins like 90-something% of tax cases is because the defense doesn't even understand the cause of action. There's very few people who would understand how powerful and significant that phrase is, but you do. They don't even understand the cause of action.
They don't even understand the charge. They don't even understand what the cause. Yeah, the cause of it. Yeah. It's so a cause of action is a duty, breach, damages. My audience is aware of that. They're saying, he has a duty to pay taxes. He breached that. He failed to pay those taxes, and the reason why it damaged us is because now we can't use the tax revenue from that to pay for whatever it is they want to make up, because it doesn't really pay for anything. And so there's three different kind of areas you can attack to tear down that cause of action. You can attack the duty, which is a lot of what people are doing in the tax movement. You can attack the breach, which is stupid, because if you attack the breach, you're kind of almost consenting to the duty. And that's what a lot of these guys are doing, like Wesley Snipes. They're attacking the breach, not the fucking duty. I can see that already with the 861. That's very, very fucking stupid. You're already in the cage. If you're not attacking they're attacking the duty, but they're also attacking kind of the breach a lot too, right? And then you have the damages, which is a great way to attack a cause of action. No, Your Honor, it didn't actually damage the government by me paying taxes, because the thing is, the government is making a presumption that the taxes go towards this and they go toward that. No one's ever tried to fight that either. Well, hold on a second there. You're making this presumption under Rule of Evidence 301 that these tax money goes to roads and it goes to this and it goes to that and it's harming the American public. Prove that. I believe from all the research I've done, it goes straight to the International Monetary Fund, and it doesn't go towards funding anything in our country. So you can attack the damages, because if you attack the damages, and if they can establish duty and they can establish breach and they can't establish damages, you still kill the cause of action. There's three ways to kill a cause of action, right? But you just don't see anyone doing any of this. That's the issue.
I don't know of a single federal judge who would entertain a defense that would question the damages if there is a duty to do a thing and the charge is you were under a duty and didn't do it.
Well, yeah, but in order to have a cause of action,
who would entertain the penalty part.
Well, you'd have to have. I think more likely no one's ever even tried. That's really what I think it is. If you understand what a cause of action is, you understand that the damages part is a way to destroy a cause of action. If you want to dismiss a cause of action, you have three ways to do it. Damages is the third leg.
Well, that's not my understanding. I think we're using different terminology, that the court does not have a remedy. Okay, that's the third leg. But that's different than establishing actual harm. The third leg is, in my understanding, in my reading of law, is that if you're asking the court for a remedy that the court by law is not empowered to provide you, then the court loses jurisdiction.
Well, that would be the duty part. That would be the duty part of the cause of action. Like, if you can't establish, like, he has a duty under 26 USC blah 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 to pay taxes. If they can't establish that duty, then the court would lose jurisdiction. But that's separate from damages. Like, for example, when I had my small claims case, I had a small claims case recently with the city of Glendale. I'm not going to get into it's negotiable instruments. I'm not going to get into all the details. But the judge threw it out because of no damages. I established duty. I established breach. He was very impressed. But he said, there's no damages here. There's no cause of action. Without damages, you have no cause of action. He threw it out. So I've experienced that firsthand. I just don't think anyone ever even, if you don't bring up any sort of attacking the possibility of damages in a tax case, which I'm not sure if anyone ever even has, then it would be irrelevant, because if you don't bring it up, it's not part of the conversation. That's what I don't think anybody understands.
I think the other thing that people miss about willful failure to file is the willfulness factor.
That's a great point. That's a great point. The reason that willful is prove intent. That's a great point.
Yes, they have to prove. The standard is they have to prove you knew.
Yeah. You
were under a duty.
Yeah.
And then you willfully chose not to fulfill it.
That's a really good point. That's very true. Yeah. Very true.
And this is something that is even a judge who was trying to work, hand over fist to side with the government would say yes, that an element of the charge that the government is under a duty to prove is willfulness.
Yeah, which is tough. If you allow it, that's tough.
Right.
That's tough to establish.
And you know how the government established that in the minds of the jury? Information returns.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
I wish tax attorneys, whenever somebody contacts them and says, hey, I think the government's going to prosecute me, I wish tax attorneys would reach out to me, because they could file a couple of filings pertaining to the law in the case, which is determined by the judge, right? And once those filings were made, DOJ would withdraw the case.
Well, I think it was you last time you were on the show or something that you said one of the reasons why they have such a high success rate, the IRS, is because they only sue people they know they can win.
That's it. We had that conversation.
Yeah, we had that conversation. And that was a shocker for me. I was like, holy shit. I was like, that's crazy.
Because what they're trying to do is not so much the loss. I mean, the losses are bad. You know how attorneys feel about that. But what makes it really problematic is the ones that they would lose, it's the reasons they would lose. Mm. That's what can't be in the official record. Let me give you an analogy. Back in the mid-'90s, there was a big movement. People would write to the IRS and they would say, here's all the stuff I've learned about tax law, so I'm not going to be filing anymore. And the IRS would send them a letter which said, based on the information you have provided, we have determined you're not required to file. Okay? Now, that was pre-useful internet. As soon as the internet started to become a useful tool, the IRS stopped sending those letters, because they knew what was going to happen is Citizen A would put his letter to the IRS up, and then their response, and then he would say, look, I've got the keys to the kingdom. Write to them and say this, and they'll agree with you that you're not required to file. Okay? That's similar to what happens if somebody presents the right arguments of law to the court well ahead of trial. The IRS will dismiss the charges because it cannot have the actual law brought into a courtroom. They only proceed when the defendant and his attorneys are dumb as fuck about the law.
Or paid or agents or blackmailed, or it could even be something darker. Like with the Wesley Snipes thing, I wonder.
Yeah. So Irwin Schiff in his trial, okay, Irwin and his attorneys were walking out. That took place right here in Las Vegas, down the road from me. And Irwin Schiff and his attorneys were walking down the hallway. And, you know, the judge's chambers always has a door to one of the hallways. So the judge doesn't have to leave via the courtroom. The judge can leave from his chambers directly into an ancillary hallway. So Irwin and his attorneys were walking down a main hallway. They were passing this T intersection. They happened to look down. They knew that that's the judge's chambers door. And who was walking out of the door? The 3 federal prosecutors in that case. So they had been meeting with the judge outside the presence of the defense. And then when Irwin's attorneys asked the judge to recuse himself because he'd met with the opposing attorneys outside the presence of the defense, he said, we were talking about something else. And when Irwin's attorneys said, then we need you to tell us what that something else was, he threatened them with contempt and sanctions. Now, he could have had them in camera, and he could have explained, if it was true, that it just happened coincidentally that the 3 same prosecutors who were prosecuting Irwin had another matter before that judge. He could have had Irwin's attorneys in chambers and said, here's the other case, you can look it up. They're the same 3 prosecutors on that case. But instead, he threatened them with contempt and sanctions.
Interesting.
So as far as I'm concerned, the judge and the government conspired outside the presence of the defense to convict Irwin.
It makes sense. They wanted to make an example out of him, especially with all the media coverage and publicity and all the other good stuff that he had been getting, like you said, on the news and stuff like that. It makes sense that. But what's crazy to me is you don't really see. Have you seen anything? I mean, was there a change, a commissioner change or something? That it seems like the IRS has gotten so much more docile over the past 15 years. It's gotten more docile, way less communicative, and when it does communicate, it's so vague it doesn't even make any sense. It's almost like a senile old man that's like gotten Alzheimer's. I don't know how else to really.
Did you ever see the movie The Usual Suspects?
I want to say no.
Okay. Well, there was a guy that played a cripple in that movie. And he was never the suspect of all this, of being the mastermind behind this whole big thing. Because he was crippled and he wasn't mentally all there. And it turns out, in the end, that was all an act. He was the mastermind.
So you think that this whole
crippled and
dementia old man thing that's been going on with the IRS over the past 15 years, do you think it's all just an act? What's the purpose for it?
Non-specificity means they can't be held to account.
So you think over the last 15 years, the IRS has gone from more of an offensive position to more of a defensive position?
No, I wouldn't phrase it that way. I think you used the better word earlier. I think you said that they've become more like, maybe you didn't use this word, but
docile.
This is docile. I'm going to say vague.
So fucking vague. Oh my God. So vague is like an understatement of the century.
Right. So it's like, a wife says to her husband, were you fucking that chick from the gym last night? And he's like, well, what chick from the gym? Who are you talking about? No, when I go to the gym, no, I don't recall having any romantic relationships at the gym. And he's just going around the edges of the argument rather than saying, no, honey, I did not fuck that chick. Okay? So I think the IRS is doing that kind of routine. It's like, if we answer these questions directly and specifically as you ask them, when you ask them, you're going to be able to hold us accountable for something.
But do you think that a lot more people, especially with this new stuff going on, are asking so many questions that they're kind of more defensive than offensive?
No.
Because in the 80s and 90s, God, it just seems like all the stories I've read and heard, it was like Mongolian warriors on horseback coming after people.
I think that was more perception than reality. The computer today does way more enforcement than the humans did 25 years ago.
I see.
Way more. Okay? But it's also harder to talk to somebody with authority at the IRS. I mean, I remember, what was the guy's first name? His last name was Freeman, which was really his last name.
Montana Freeman?
No. This is a guy. His last name just happened to be Freeman.
Okay.
It was like Frank Freeman.
Okay.
But he tells a story from like the early 70s. I didn't hear it until the 90s. He went to the IRS building in his neighborhood, and he asked to speak to the district director. And they showed him up to the office of the district director, and the district director asked him if he'd like something to eat and something to drink, and he said yes. And a woman came in and brought him a glass of water and some cookies, okay? And he sat there having a conversation with the district director of the IRS. And he said, look, as far as I can tell, this is what you guys have been doing, and it's unconstitutional. And the district director thanked him for coming in, said he would look into it. He would make sure that Mr. Freeman was not bothered in the meantime. And there was this polite, remember we were talking about how people act now?
Yeah.
There was this polite conversation between two gentlemen where he got to say his piece and the district director said his piece. Well, today, the IRS doesn't want to say its piece.
Yeah. Oh, they're getting even. It's like it seems like every month it's even worse. And it's like, how could this even get any worse? You're not even saying anything. Like, why not just take like a thing of ink and just slam it on and make it look like one of those Rochester tests that they use for psychiatric and send that out? It'd be almost more comprehensible.
So you understand the power of the words without jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And you are aware of the legal principle. Once you challenge an agency's jurisdiction, it can no longer be assumed, it must be proven.
Yes.
So, and you're also aware that silence in response to a jurisdictional challenge does not give rise to jurisdiction.
Yeah, it's acquiescence that there's not jurisdiction, really.
Right. So, a gentleman sent a due process package into the IRS. The collections officer kept sending him letters, threatening letters. So he called her. He got her on the phone. And then he called another day and he got somebody else in her same office on the phone. And he called another day and he got... So here was the message. I share this story with you. That they don't know. You talked earlier about is it ignorance? Okay, well, and I said in the lower level, the employees, it certainly is. So the collections officer said, I don't know what you're talking about this due process thing. He said, do you have a fax? She said, yes, I do. I'm going to fax it to you. So he faxed her this very lengthy due process package. She read it. He called her back the next day. And she said, this has nothing to do with me. You need to file with our appeals department. She was completely ignorant of the fact that if the agency is without jurisdiction, the agency cannot require a person to proceed through the agency's administrative appeals process. Okay? So that issue got taken up with the commissioner's office. But my point is, you're not wrong in that they are ignorant. And they say things, but then on the other side of the coin, probably 99 out of 100 Americans, when told what you sent, this package where you challenge the agency's jurisdiction, that doesn't matter. You have to go through the agency appeals process, would have gone, oh, okay. Because they don't know. They don't know that once the agency is without jurisdiction, it can't require the person to go through the appeals process.
Yeah, but
because it has no jurisdiction.
That's why it's so interesting talking to you, because like the past 15 years, I've heard of literally no stories of any of this. It's just everything you send in, and like if anyone gets anything back, I'm shocked. Oh, send me a copy. I want to see what they sent you. And so maybe 2% of the time they'll get something back, and I try as hard as I can to get my hands on everything they send back. 99% of everything that they send back is, thank you very much, we need this much time to evaluate everything.
60 or 90 days to get back to you.
Yeah, that's it. So I remember one lady one time was like, oh yeah, I got a letter and it says that your account's all set, you don't need to file anymore. And I said, oh, you're going to send it to me. And I got her to send me one. I've gotten maybe one in the past 15 years.
Yeah. It's and remember, now it's all being done by the computer. So if the computer spits something out to a human, the human is basically expected to fix whatever caused that roadblock for the computer. So a lot of these letters, the computer can't make anything of them, right? Because it's not thinking AI, right? We just talked about earlier that AI can't think. So when somebody sends a letter in, the computer can't deal with that. So what happens is, like, somebody along the path of the mailroom puts a code into the computer that says, we received a personal letter from taxpayer Jones. Okay? The computer says, I don't know what to do with that. So the computer kicks that out to a person. The person looks at it and says, there's nothing valid in here, goes over to their computer and enters in code TC-129X zebra. And then the computer reads that as, oh, the personal correspondence does not affect my progress, and then the computer continues spitting out letters. So there really is no...
But I've seen a lot of things where people are sending in shit that doesn't even make sense.
Oh, yeah.
And the computer stops sending them letters that they owe taxes. I've seen stuff even like that, like goofy stuff, where it's like stuff that if I was at the IRS, I'd be like, and even if I knew what I knew now, I'd be like, this is horseshit. But it works. Like I've seen a lot of things that shouldn't work over the last 15 years too. Craziness, it's all over the place.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, those codes are entered by humans. So if the human thinks that the person's argument is valid, they enter the code to tell the computer to stop.
Oh, okay. I see.
Simple as that. It's funny because I always joke around. You and I both understand affidavits where many people do not. And affidavits have to contain facts, not argument, number one. If they contain argument, they're invalid. And the second thing is the facts have to be relevant to the issue at hand. Okay. So I'm going to give you a slightly exaggerated example. This is just slightly of the kind of affidavit that I've seen people send to the IRS.
Oh, don't even. Oh, yeah. I know where you're going.
I don't know income tax because I'm a white Christian virgin born male. Okay. So
with
maybe that's true.
And colons.
Maybe that's not.
Sometimes colors.
Yes. So, and those are not relevant to whether or not a person owes taxes, right? So, yeah, I think the important part when we talk about how the IRS responds is there's a person, a live body, who has to make a determination. Is this valid? Is this not valid? Do I have to send this to my manager? Does my manager have to send it to the group manager? Where does this lie? And if the employee makes the decision it's invalid, they type in a code that tells the computer to continue. If the employee determines that it's valid, the employee inputs a code that tells the computer to not go any further on that year. Okay? So something I share all the time is this. How many IRS employees gave up their job at MIT or NASA to work at IRS?
I doubt it. I doubt anybody.
Zero. Right. My point is, these people are not intellectually brilliant. So occasionally they'll see an argument that you and I would laugh at, and they say, oh, well, that looks compelling to me. And so they tell the computer to stop. In other cases, like this revenue officer we were just talking about a moment ago, she failed to understand the significance of your agency is without jurisdiction. She didn't even respond to the issue of jurisdiction. She did not even apparently had not been trained to understand that if somebody challenges the agency's jurisdiction, you need to stop and send this upstairs to the legal department.
Yeah.
Okay? Because once the jurisdiction has been challenged and not proven, the agency then does not have jurisdiction. There's no magic jurisdiction because I chose not to reply. That doesn't work. They have to prove on the record jurisdiction, and they don't have it until they do that. But apparently they're not training their people.
Well,
and the important thing I think to keep in mind is those people are exercising delegated authority from the commissioner.
That's okay. That's interesting. I've never heard that before. It makes sense.
There's delegation of there's delegation of authority orders
because the commissioner is voted in. Is that
no? He's a political appointee, but he has authority over the taxes the IRS collects. Okay, so literally there are thousands of delegation of authority orders where the commissioner. Well, okay, so Congress almost always vests the authority in the Secretary of the Treasury, probably 99% of the time. The Secretary of the Treasury then delegates it to the Commissioner of Internal Revenue, who is an officer of the government, not an employee, an officer. Now, the Commissioner has to delegate it further downward to authorize employees to exercise his officer's authority. Okay? So he has to say, concerning collections, I am delegating my authority under section 6000, blah, 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 to people in the compliance division who hold this title, this title, this title, and this title. Okay? If there's no delegation of authority from the secretary to the commissioner, from the commissioner down to those workers, they're committing an illegal act. Okay? And of course, you are aware of the principle, notice to the agent is notice to the principal, and notice to the principal is notice to the agent, right? So when to use the example of that guy who called and got a hold of the revenue officer, when he said, here's what I'm faxing you over the package, she looks at it and she sees the IRS is without jurisdiction. At that moment, her position needed to be constitutionally compliant. Her position needed to be, I'm stopping right now. I'm forwarding this to the legal department. That should be in their training. I'm guessing the reason it's not is their jurisdiction is challenged, income tax jurisdiction, is challenged never.
Well, yeah, I mean, really one of the most interesting points that I've ever seen as regards to what you're talking about there is actually 26 U.S.C. 7701 subsection A39, which took me a long time to understand. Jesus Christ. When it comes to the tax code, like Trader Business gets me giggling. A39 was like I was having like an existential crisis for like months trying to figure out what in God's name is this.
You're going to make me pull this up on my iPad, aren't you?
I got it right here for you. A39. I'm going to read it because I don't know how big it is on your screen. Persons residing outside United States is the name of the title of the first part there. If any citizen or resident of the United States does not reside in and is not found in any United States judicial district, such citizen or resident shall be treated as residing in the District of Columbia for purposes of any provision of this title relating to A, jurisdiction of courts, or B, enforcement of summons. And do you know what that is in essence? It's 4 USC 72. all offices attached to the seat of government shall be exercised in the District of Columbia and not elsewhere except as otherwise expressly provided by law. They're telling you in trade or business that it's a public office. And then in A39, they're telling you that public office, no matter where this thing or person or corporation is located, is we're going to treat it as though it's in the District of Columbia because all offices, all public offices attached to the seat of government shall be exercised in the District of Columbia and not elsewhere, except as otherwise expressly provided by law. It's total mindfuck.
So I disagree with your interpretation.
You don't like it?
Not that I don't like it, I just disagree with it.
Well, it would only apply to citizens and residents of the United States.
Right. So
those are the only two classes that they mentioned in 39.
Right. Because those would be the withholding agents.
Yeah.
So what they're saying, because you understand venue, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, I live in southern Nevada. Mm-hmm. So if the government wanted to bring an action against me, they would have to bring that action in the judicial district that covers the Las Vegas area. Okay? But what if they had a cause of action against me and I had decided for the next couple of years I want to live in Belize, okay? Then I'm not residing in southern Nevada anymore, so they can't file in that judicial district. So if they have if the United States government has a legitimate cause of action, they have to be able to file someplace, despite the fact that I'm in Belize. So the place that they are authorized to file under that set of circumstances is in the courts of D.C. The federal courts of D.C., not the D.C. municipal courts.
Yeah, I mean, I see it differently because the federal court in your area also operates under 4 USC 72. All federal courts, all district courts operate under 4 USC 72. So like a district court would be a federal court. It's not a court of that state. It's actually a court of the District of Columbia.
That's not factual.
I mean, I think that's the way it works. The federal courts all fall under 4 USC 72. They're federal.
But
they're not state. They're not state related at all. They're federal. They go off federal statute.
But they are authorized. The Constitution grants Congress the authority to create the inferior courts.
Yes. But that would be a congressional power. It wouldn't be a power that they could inject into the state. The federal courts don't operate under state umbrellas. Plus, state of California itself is it's a corporate entity. It's run by a U.S. citizen. Like Gavin Newsom is the governor of state of California, but Gavin Newsom is a U.S. citizen. So obviously state of California is not referring to the actual state because the actual state would not have a governor that's a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen. It's impossible. It's physically impossible that a state governor would be a 14th Amendment citizen. It's impossible.
Well, leaving aside Newsom in the state of California and getting back to the United States District Courts, the concept of Congress establishing the however many judicial districts there are throughout the United States is to allow the citizens to respond to federal allegations or to bring actions in a federal court without having to travel thousands of miles, which would, of course, make defending yourself or bringing an action for many people, especially back in the founding days when people were traveling on horseback. If you didn't have judicial districts that were within the states of the Union, people would have been, on a practical level, foreclosed from the state from engaging in the federal courts.
No, I understand that, but those courts are extensions of D.C. They operate as though they're in D.C. through 4 USC 72. Their office is attached to the seat of government, and they're exercised as though they're in the District of Columbia. That's why federal courthouses, when you're in the federal courthouse, they almost have like their own special rule set that's different than everywhere else, kind of like airports. Airports also fall under 4 U.S.C. 72.
I think a great way to analogize this, which I think you would support, okay? So the United States Embassy in Britain, it's under U.S. law.
Yeah, it'd be 4
It's not
U.S.C.
under British
72.
law.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is these federal courthouses, they are under the authority of the judicial branch that sits in D.C.
Yeah,
But that doesn't mean they are D.C.
Well, they're
Remember,
exercised as though they're in D.C. They basically act as though they're in D.C. even though they're in a state.
Well, they have there's a federal supremacy clause, so there's that.
But my point is, I think that's what A39 is referring to. I think A39 is referring to 4 U.S.C. 72 because trade or business is public office. All offices attached to the seat of government shall be exercised in the District of Columbia.
You're reaching out into this constellation of statutes, and you're saying, I hope you won't take offense at this, you're saying, I say, that star, and that star are in a constellation, and they're connected because I say so. There's nothing in the statute that says that.
Well, A39 says that.
It does not say that. Tell me where it references 4 U.S.C. 72.
It doesn't reference 4 U.S.C. 72. To me, it's just saying the same thing because you have trade or business being public office.
You're saying it makes sense to you.
I mean, fine.
Okay.
I don't see how else it could. I don't see how else it couldn't be. I don't see how else would you explain A39.
I did like 10 minutes ago.
Oh, okay, fine.
So let me tell you a quick story. Used to know a Secret Service agent, Don Goronsky. Back then, we're talking 30 years ago, 35 years ago. He was already in his late 50s, so he's probably not with us anymore. And he drove a government car, which was like just this absolute top of the line Mercedes, right? It's like, and I said, Don, how'd you get this Mercedes? He says, well, my cover is I'm a very successful import-export guy. So the home I live in, the car that I drive, it all supports that undercover narrative. Okay. So he got a call. He had a hidden radio built into behind the whatever you call the glove box, the box. They had a hidden radio in there, and he got a radio call that they had found a case of grenades down in South Central LA. The Secret Service had raided a gang home. They found a case of grenades. He was senior agent in charge of whatever at that time. So they called him and said, you got to get here. So you've seen probably in your lifetime those round red emergency lights that have a magnet on the bottom and a coil cord. You plug it into the cigarette lighter and you throw it up on the roof?
Yes.
Okay. So Don throws that up on the roof. And he's hauling ass, he's hauling ass down the 405 freeway. And a CHP pulls him over. So Don, being a gentleman, today they probably would have shot the CHP officer and kept going. But back then, things were more civil. So Don pulls over and the CHP guy comes and he says, who the fuck are you? And he goes, Don Goronsky, Secret Service. I'm running a call. He says, not with that fucking light, you're not. I was like, what do you mean? He says, California has a law. When you run code, you must have a forward-facing, steady burn red light. Now, that's true. Okay? That's still on the books today. At the other 49 states, you have all these lights going around up on the roof, right? Any law enforcement vehicle in California, it's got all the lights going on, but then there's one little red light, forward-facing, steady burn. That law from like 80 years ago is still on the books. Okay? So he tells Goronsky, you can't run code without a forward-facing, steady burn in California. Now, Don had already identified himself as a Secret Service agent. So Don said, this car is under the jurisdiction of the United States government. I represent the United States government. We have the supremacy clause. which means your forward-facing steady burn law doesn't mean shit to federal officers running code. Because of the supremacy clause, not because of 4 U.S.C. 72, but because the federal government, since the founding day of this nation, the states cannot override federal law. So that's why the courthouses have, as you said, their own rules. That's why Don Goronsky was able to drive away from the guy. And the way Don left it with him again being a gentleman, he said, "You've got my driver's license and you've got my plate. If you'd like to cite me, go ahead, but I have an emergency. I got to go." Okay. And nothing ever happened. He never got a citation.
Well, I can imagine. Yeah, it's kind of like just...
Yeah. But I tell that story to point out that state laws cannot interfere with federal prerogative as long as the federal action is constitutionally sound.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that, but I don't want to get off on a whole debate, but basically, I don't think there even is such a thing as state law, because the like I said, state of California, if you look at the definition of a person in 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection B3, it's defined as an individual or an organization. And if you go into the definition of a U.S. citizen from 8 U.S.C. 1401A, which is the same one you see at the beginning of the 14th Amendment, any person born in the United States, blah, blah, blah. The definition of the word persons that they're using in that section comes from the definition section of that section, which would be individual or organization, right? State of California, the EIN number for state of California starts with a 94, so it's not even foreign. But when you look at the definition of, let's say, like legal tender or something like that, it says that foreign gold and silver coin is not legal tender for payment of debts. So California is considered foreign from, congressional areas such as Washington, D.C. and stuff like that. A state, as per Article 1, Section 10, would have to use gold and silver coin in tender of payment of debts. And if you go and read the legal tender cases and stuff like that, the way they got around that was they said in the legal tender cases, yeah, fine, states can only use gold and silver coin, but Congress can do whatever they want. And so they printed Federal Reserve notes and U.S. Treasury bonds and all that under Congress, right? So I don't believe that there even is state law in the world we're living in right now. It doesn't exist. The laws in state of California are really just federal laws that are under a U.S. citizen called State of California, which is run by a U.S. citizen named Gavin Newsom. That's a whole nother discussion, but I don't think there is any state law. It's only federal law. State of California law is federal law. Because it's a U.S. citizen.
You're aware there are 348 million people in this country, and not one of them has ever made that argument successfully to a court.
Yes, but I've also gone back and collected tons of case law on this subject. Tons. Literally, I have
except for the one thing that would support what you're saying.
No, I found the exact case by John Marshall. So
you found a court decision where it says that there's no law in any state of the union, it's all federal law. You found that court decision.
No, I found a court case from John Marshall, actually, 1805 decision, where he's talking about how the definition of the word state in the Constitution is a completely different definition than under Congress. And he's talking about how a resident of Washington, D.C. cannot sue a citizen of a state. And he goes into details as to how that works and how it's basically a disparity of classes, right? And so that same idea translated, and then you add in things like Article 1, Section 10, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. It's like, well, hold on a second. If Federal Reserve notes were made under Congress, then State of California, the corporation, must also be under Congress. If it's under Congress, then State of California itself is legally a U.S. citizen. It's wild, but the problem is not that no one has ever successfully. So yeah, you're right. No one has ever brought that or successfully brought that, or however you want to say it, right? But the thing is that just like we were saying earlier when we were talking about the Wesley Snipes case, when I hear that, I just laugh because I know that if there was maybe anyone at any point in time that had brought, quote unquote, that argument, it was absolute shit. Whereas if I have every single definition, every single statute, tons of case law, and then I have a whole timeline. The timeline is the most important thing. People find one piece of case law and they say, look, I got one piece of case law. No. I want the whole timeline of every single relevant case, and then I want every single quote from every single case, and then I want every single definition for every single word used in each individual quote. For example, the definition of the term United States citizen, U.S. citizen, or citizen of the United States was completely different before the 14th Amendment in the slaughterhouse cases. And there's actual cases where they talk about that, such as ex parte nulls, such as so collecting all those together and seeing the full timeline
is not a federal case.
It's a California Supreme Court, but still, like it becomes persuasive authority. But my point is that when you build it all out into a whole timeline, and you have every single definition and every single piece of case law, and you walk it all the way through the entire timeline, I truly believe that state of California is a U.S. citizen being run by a U.S. citizen.
Okay.
I know.
I wait for you to defend yourself with that argument.
Yep, I know. It's wild, but...
And it's not the first time I've said that to people, so I'm not picking on you.
No, I know.
Whenever somebody says to me, this is the way the law operates, and I think that that's probably not true, I say I hope there's a day where the rubber meets the road. You get to file that with a court and see how that works out.
Well, you know how it's going to work out. They just want to dump it all and get away from it and not talk about any of this stuff anymore. It just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. It's not like these cases that happened back in the 90s and 2000s where they would go on these like what we're going to read right here, or trying to read. Hopefully we'll get through at least some of it with the Wesley Snipes case. They don't even really do this anymore. They just dump everything. And then I've heard a lot of stories recently about how like they're trying to get away from trials, like the amount of trials now. Like I follow a bunch of trial attorneys on social media, and they're talking about how like we might be the last generation of trial attorneys. Trials are kind of going away.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is kind of sliding. The whole thing is kind of sliding. So
on the 14th Amendment, I kind of have a funny thought that I share with people about that. If a law was predicated on the subject of the law being a 14th Amendment citizen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which everything is, but yeah.
I say to people, if the government said, we're going to take you to trial based on this thing, and this thing is predicated on you being a 14th Amendment citizen, say, and I want to see the government, I want a black defendant to say, I'm not a 14th Amendment citizen.
I do too.
And I want to see the federal government march into court.
Yep, me too.
With the press sitting in the gallery and argue, oh, you do have it.
Yep.
You are, yeah. I want to see them argue, this law applies to you because we're going to do a genealogical study and bring it in as evidence showing that you are the posterity, to quote the court, you are the posterity of a freed black slave.
You got more than 1/8 African blood, and we're going to prove it. We got 23andMe and everybody in here.
Right. So, I'm like, so with that as the backdrop, my position is, aside from, as you point out, like all the 42 USC, 1981, 1982, 1983, 4, 5, those are all predicated on the 14th Amendment.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm like...
Well, everything is predicated on the 14th Amendment because when you go back and look at state citizenship, corporations, they talked about it several times, adding corporations in as part of the definition of the word person, and the courts would never allow it. They never allowed it until Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad Company in 1886. That was the case when they allowed it, but they only allowed it under the 14th Amendment. So whenever you see any definition of the word person that includes legal fiction, such as corporations or organizations, they're always talking about only the 14th Amendment because the other class of citizenship, state citizenship, doesn't have any corporations in it.
By the way, they didn't allow it in that case. It's not in the decision and it's not in the dicta. It's a footnote.
Really?
Yep, take a look at the decision. It's a footnote in the decision. It's not part of the decision.
Huh.
And the footnote doesn't even reference any precedent. The footnote just says, this is how we're looking at this.
That's, I'm trying to think. I remember it being in the actual opinion because I read the actual.
Nope.
No, I'm going to reread that. So it's just
Yeah.
a presumption ever since 1886 that persons are covered under the 14th Amendment?
That corporations are covered by the 14th Amendment. By the way, when you say all law is upon 14th Amendment citizens, there plenty of laws existed before the 14th Amendment was enacted.
But they wouldn't
So
have the
those
definition. If the definition of the word person includes legal fictions, you know you're looking at 14th Amendment. That's the dead giveaway every time.
Not if it was passed in, say, 1842.
But if it was passed in 1842, the definition of the word person wouldn't include corporations because they talk. I found cases where they talk about it, and every single time
Corporations
they're
existed
like,
back then.
no, we're not doing this. They tried for the whole beginning of the country to get those things added in, and they were unsuccessful.
My point is that corporations existed back then, and any law that applied to a corporation would have nothing to do with the 14th Amendment because the 14th Amendment hadn't even been thought of at that time. No. So I'm just making the statement, it does not apply to all law. It cannot.
No, I understand that, but I don't think I've never seen like everything I've ever read in the 1800s, they don't use such formal stifled language. They say man, woman, her, him, and they often use the race, white man, black man. Mm-hmm. Like this whole person, natural person thing, they didn't really do that in the 1800s at all. So the terminology completely shifted after that point. Like, for example, when you go to appeals in the 1800s, it was always the plaintiff in error or defendant in error is the way that they would phrase that, right?
Absolutely.
Which meant the defendant was the one who brought the appeal. If it was defendant in error, if it was the plaintiff that brought the appeal, it'd be plaintiff in error, right? So the terminology completely changed to this like sterile, hospital grade person, natural person. And it's like it's not even like real human language anymore, whereas before it was. So the shift is so obvious that you start seeing things like persons. They use that a little bit here and there, but they used persons mainly to describe the slaves and the freed slaves and the African blood, people with African blood. That's when they use the term persons, and the reason why is because of the Dred Scott case. But anyways, we're getting way off. But my point is that I don't think
you and I on a tear? No way, I don't believe it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen anything that isn't explicitly under the 14th Amendment. I mean, hardly ever do I ever see anything. I mean, the 14th Amendment has become literally, it's kind of gobbled up everything, every law, every administrative, everything. From my experience, I mean, how can you have a vehicle code, a California vehicle code, if the person has a 9th and 10th Amendment? A 14th Amendment citizen doesn't have the 9th and 10th Amendment. It's never been incorporated through the incorporation doctrine. So a state citizen would have the 9th Amendment. The 9th Amendment would make the California Vehicle Code unconstitutional, but none of that applies.
How so?
Because the 9th Amendment says that just because it's the sovereignty clause. The 9th Amendment is the sovereignty amendment. It's what makes the citizens of the states essentially sovereign, and it's the whole. That's the attachment to the Magna Carta. That's everything. Everything is the 9th and 10th Amendment. I mean, the first 8 amendments are cool and all; they're fantastic. But the 9th and 10th Amendment is exactly when Roger B. Taney said during the Dred Scott decision that saying citizen and saying a citizen is a member of the sovereignty. He said that in the case. He's referring to the 9th and 10th Amendment. He's referring to the Magna Carta. He's referring to, and he refers to, even Mr. Miller, Samuel Freeman Miller, refers to the Magna Carta directly in the Slaughterhouse case's opinion, right? So sovereignty is found in that 9th and 10th Amendment. The 9th and 10th Amendment was never incorporated for 14th Amendment U.S. citizens at all. They never even talked about it. It's been unincorporated, and it's literally never even been argued, to my knowledge. So the thing is that those two...
You are correct about that.
Those two...
By the way,
yeah, go ahead.
The standard, you're familiar with the incorporation doctrine?
Of course. Very, very.
Okay. So one of the two principles for the incorporation doctrine is that in order for SCOTUS to wave its magic wand and incorporate it against the states, it has to be an enumerated right in the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
That, remember when the court undid Roe v. Wade with Dobbs?
Yeah, I didn't review the case, but yes.
Okay, so here's what happened. Roe v. Wade was based on the court finding a woman's right to choose. That's not an enumerated right, correct?
That's correct.
That violated the incorporation doctrine.
Oh, very interesting.
The incorporation doctrine says it must explicitly be an enumerated item in the first 8 amendments. Okay? So that people think what the Supreme Court was doing in Dobbs was some sort of war against abortion. What the Supreme Court was doing was saying, if we don't fix this error in Roe, which is a non-enumerated right, was included, was found, and then went through the incorporation principle. Okay, if we don't fix that, what else could go through the incorporation doctrine on this precedent that they can find Ninth Amendment rights and incorporate them? Okay, that's what the court was doing in Dobbs, saying, wait a second, back in Roe, we set a terrible precedent. Okay, so we're going to fix that with Dobbs. And I tell people all the time, and most you can understand, but most people cannot, that Dobbs had nothing to do with abortion. I mean, it did, because it made a decision. But what the court was fixing was
fairly legal in nature. Yeah.
Correcting the structural deficiency of Roe.
And it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. But the thing is that the incorporation doctrine only applies in federal cases under certain circumstances. It only applies to 14th Amendment citizens. It wouldn't apply to a state citizen.
Correct. Absolutely.
And that's kind of like my point. A state citizen would have the 9th and 10th Amendments. The 9th and 10th Amendments would make something like the California Vehicle Code kind of moot. But the thing is that they just presume everything is just a presumption under Rule of Evidence 301 that you're a 14th Amendment citizen. That's it. Everything is just a presumption.
Can I tell you what's going on with driver's license and the vehicle code?
Yeah, I'm going to turn my lights on, but I'm going to be able to hear you. Go ahead and talk.
Okay. So I did a video probably close to a year ago about the Social Security Act. And what I pointed out is that the Social Security Act was enacted under Congress's territorial jurisdiction, not its subject matter jurisdiction, because as you know, you can search high and low through the United States Constitution and you will not find any authority to create a retirement plan for the people of America. Okay? So we know that it's not subject matter, it's territorial. And I don't know if your listeners are aware, Congress has 2 forms of jurisdiction. Subject matter is that those are, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, and some others, right? And then, Article 1, Section 8 in general, and then a few others. Okay. Territorial is where Congress is legislating for the possessions and territories.
Yes.
Exclusively.
Yes.
And nary the two shall meet. Okay? So when Congress passes a law under its territorial authority, it does not apply in the states of the Union.
Correct, yeah.
So we know that the Social Security Act was territorial because there's no authority in the Constitution for it, right? There's no subject matter grant of authority, right?
Yep.
So not only that, but then in 1959, Alaska and Hawaii became states.
Yeah, and they're still listed in the USC as territories in a couple areas. They haven't updated it. It's hilarious.
in the Alaska Omnibus Act and in the Hawaii Omnibus Act, it specifically says, and I put the statutes up in my video from a year ago on Social Security. You can find it on Rumble or find it on my new YouTube channel. Yeah. So when it says in there that all these programs are to be administered by the states, okay, it meant the states, the federal states, not states of the union.
Yeah.
Right? So then in the Omnibus Act, after Hawaii and Alaska become states, it literally says the special definition of state now excludes Hawaii since its ratification as a state.
Yep.
Okay. So what they did was they had named Hawaii and Alaska up until 1960. When they became states of the Union, they took them out of the definition of state because this definition does not apply. And it says right in there, the special definition. Okay?
Yep.
That's their words, that's Congress's words, not mine. So here's the thing. The jurisdiction of the entire Social Security Act from 1935 and everything that's piggybacked on top of it since then is possessions and territories.
Is D.C. in the territories, yep.
Correct. Now, the Social Security Administration only has authority, jurisdiction, to create forms for the citizens of D.C., the possessions and territories. That's where the territorial boundaries are. Okay? So when somebody fills out an SS5 looking to open a Social Security account and get a Social Security number, that form is exclusively for citizens of D.C., the possessions and territory. So then the person signs it under penalty of perjury. What's the status baked into that form?
U.S.
The
citizen.
status is that they're a citizen of D.C. possessions or territories.
Yep.
Okay?
It's U.S. citizen, resident, and then they have one for like refugees, but that's basically just like resident. Same thing. It's just resident and citizen. That's
Yes.
it. That's it. It's that simple.
So the Social Security Administration receives the SS5, and it opens a Social Security account, and you get a Social Security number. All of that is exclusively limited to the citizens of D.C. possessions and territories. Now, is it possible that a citizen of a territory can reside in a state of the Union?
Yeah, the word reside itself means that they're not a citizen of that zone. That's why everything says
Correct.
resident on it. So a U.S.
Correct.
citizen is a citizen who has his allegiance and subjugation is with the District of Columbia, and he's resident in a foreign state.
That is correct. Now, when you go to get a driver's license in the state of California, what do they demand of you?
Proof of residency.
A Social Security number.
Oh,
Why?
because that's evidence that your citizenship lies with the District of Columbia.
You're an alien in the state of California.
You're an alien in the state of California.
Republic of California.
Yeah.
Now, if you go back and do the research, you will find, starting in around the 1820s, there were all throughout the United States, the courts ruled that state governments have the right to regulate foreigners within their borders, aliens within their borders, because the aliens who are resident, they can come in, they can commit fraud, they can commit crimes, and then they can flee back to their abode as opposed to their residence. Okay? So there's this gigantic body from the early 1800s of judicial decisions saying that states of the Union can regulate aliens within their border. So that's why they demand a Social Security number, because when you give it, you are testing. I'm not a de jure citizen of the state of California. I'm an alien and subject to your regulation.
Yeah.
Okay? When somebody gets a real estate license, okay, they have to furnish a Social Security number.
Yeah.
Why? Because the Social Security number is the safety blanket for the state.
Without the Social Security number, they risk the possibility of doing something unconstitutional.
Correct. Regulating somebody under the case law, they don't have the authority to regulate.
Yep.
They have to show that the person is an alien within their border to have the authority to regulate.
And that's what I find the most fascinating is it's like the system is designed to essentially steal our nationality. It's a giant. The Matrix is almost like a the whole operation of the Matrix is to fool us into unknowingly giving up our own nationality.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I agree 100%. I've been so swamped I haven't done it, but I'm intending to send a letter to the Social Security Administration asking, with an affidavit attached, saying I was never a citizen of D.C., the possessions or territories. I've at all times been a de jure citizen of the Republic of Nevada, okay, or California first and then here, okay, and that I would like them to provide me with the statute that allows them to create Social Security accounts and issue a Social Security number to a person who is not a citizen of D.C., possessions, or territories.
I actually found the statute. If you go to, I think it's 20 CFR, like 422.402. I forget where it is exactly. I can look it up if you want to look it up. It tells you who the three classes that qualify to get a Social Security number, and it's just you already know. It's U.S. citizen,
yep,
resident, and then there's like a third one that's like very complicated, but it's basically a resident. So that's it.
So, by the way, what that means, that third class, is where the United States federal government has a Social Security agreement with foreign nations.
Okay.
So, our people who are properly within the jurisdiction of the U.S. Social Security program, if they go to England, for instance, they can get benefits. If somebody from England comes here, they can get benefits because of there's a cross-nation agreement on Social Security.
I see. Okay.
That's the third class. Okay. But my point is this. I'm guessing either I'll get no response or their response will be the incomplete and non-persuasive argument that their authority was granted by the Social Security Act of 1935. Okay.
They're going to give you some crap, or they're just not going to respond, especially with the amount of people doing this kind of stuff now. I think where we're headed is just a total blackout. I think that's where we're headed.
But one of the things I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to make sure that letter is so detailed, such as talking about the Hawaii Omnibus Act and the Alaska Omnibus Act in 1960. I'm going to make sure all that information is in there. So there's no way that they can rationally argue that their authority, that they have authority, jurisdiction to maintain Social Security accounts for citizens of the states of the Union.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to nail that down so that there's no way out for them, and I want to see what they say.
What are you trying to do? Get your money back, or you're just trying to?
No. First of all, I'm trying to get them to acknowledge what I've already talked about in that lengthy, I think it's about a 40-minute video where I lay all this out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number one, I'm looking for them to validate it and say, there is no authority for us to maintain a Social Security account, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure they're going to reference like, well, your parents filed an SS5. Okay, that's fine. But they didn't know what the fucking form meant. It was filed out of ignorance. I am not now, nor have I ever been a citizen of D.C., the possessions or territories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or a resident.
Yeah. So, number one, I'm looking. Sometimes when they answer stupidly, it's as good as them answering truthfully.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second thing is, depending on what they say in their response, I'm going to demand that they terminate the Social Security account with the number that was given to me when I was a child.
Yeah, I don't know.
They never had jurisdiction to maintain it in the first place. Because I want to be able to go to an agency here in, say, Nevada. Go to an agency when they say, we need a Social Security number. I don't have one.
I do that now, and all the things that I've looked at and all the cases I've looked at and all the statute I've looked at, I actually think that the Social Security number is the taxpayer identification number of your sole proprietorship. I don't think it was ever yours. I think because if you look at this is what I think. If you look at 26 CFR 301.7701-11. It's entitled Social Security Number. I'll show it to you. I don't even know if you can read it, but I'll put it up on the screen just in case. I don't know if it's big enough to read. But it says here, for purposes of this chapter, the term Social Security Number means the taxpayer identifying number of an individual or estate, which is assigned pursuant to section blah, 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 blah. And if you go on the W-9 form and you look at where it says individual, it says individual / sole proprietor under section 3A.